atheist guy?
Yeah, yeah. You just name a few inspirations. It could be some atheist philosophers or yeah.
Sure. I mean, I don't really have people who inspired me, more ideas who did. So I think that the distinctions in philosophy, like the manifest for scientific image, a priori versus a posteriori, synthetic analytic, is ought distinction. Like there's a whole bunch of distinctions in philosophy, empiricism versus rationalism. All those distinctions are the things that really inspired me in philosophy. I think that one of them, that's the biggest contribution that philosophy has made, that its biggest use is that looking at the distinctions between different kinds of conceptual knowledge.
Yeah. So I thought you might mention David Hume or Immanuel Kant. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care about them as people, but I think their distinctions are good. Like Hume did the is-ought distinction, Kant did the synthetic analytic distinction, and a few others, the noumena phenomena distinction. So I like their distinctions, but I don't really care about them as individuals.
okay. Uh, and if I'm not wrong, your worldview on morality is moral realism. If I'm
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
you're a moral realist. If I'm not, if correct me if I'm wrong. You're a
Yes.
moral realist.
Yes, I am a moral realist.
So how would you come about, as a moral realist and an atheist? Because uh, just can you just give me a frame? How can you frame this? How atheism and moral realism? Because I have read a lot on this, but I just wanted to know your explanation on this. So
Yeah,
if you might.
morality is like any other phenomenon. Like we see stuff falling all the time. We don't say, "Oh, a god did it." We think it's probably a natural
Sure.
phenomenon, and so we make predictions. We say, "Ah, there's a common feature in nature. We want to understand it. We have to make predictions and see if we can understand it better." And that's what we do for morality too. It's not any different than any other law of physics.
Yeah, I understand. I actually was reading. Uh, what was his name? He actually, I don't remember the name to be precise, but what his idea was similar, quite similar to yours, and he actually came about, evolutionary moral realism. He actually argued that through natural selection, we can go about with moral realism, and so there's a whole paper in academia. So I
Sure,
think someone has joined us.
I have no idea who that is you were talking about, or if their model is like mine. But sure, I'm not. I have nothing. Mine has nothing to do with more of evolution. So I think that morality is true, independent of evolution. So there's even if there are other species outside of humans, like on other planets that didn't evolve, like computer-based life forms, they're also going to have morality too. So I think morality is bigger than evolution.
Yeah, I understand. So I I think I missed your point. So what was your explanation for moral realism?
It's a phenomenon like any other. So, like if we see stuff falling, we say, "Oh, look, there's something in nature causing this." And in morality, we have this feeling that when people kill other people, they're doing something wrong. And so, it's like if we look off in the distance and we see an ocean, we could say, "Oh, maybe it's just a illusion, a mirage in our brains, or maybe it's a real thing." Same thing applies to morality. We have these feelings that when someone kills someone else, it's wrong. It's possible it's uh, just an illusion caused by evolution, or it's possible it's a real thing. And we just take it like any other phenomenon and make predictions and say, well, if it's a real thing, here's what we would expect. And that's essentially what we're doing. So we're just treating it like any other law of nature. And what it actually is a higher order emergent property like fitness. So fitness is the feature that some animals survive in more environments than others. And that's an objective feature of nature. It's real. It's not based on our opinion. and it exists, and it's just a description between how organisms and their environments interact. Morality is the same thing. Morality is a higher order emergent property describing how agents in an environment interact. So it's just like fitness. They're obviously not the same thing, but they're both higher order emergent properties.
So can you explain high order emergent?
You cut out.
Yeah. So can you explain high order emergent properties?
Higher order emergent properties are complex things that exist. So fitness is one, health is one, uh, biological systems are one, ecosystems are one. They're just complex things that aren't like don't have a location. Like if you say, well, locate fitness, like you can't say it exists here. It's not like a particle, but but it does exist. So there are things that are relationships that do exist in reality just fine, and they don't need to have like an exact location. So higher order emergent properties are just complex natural things.
Yeah. So what's your take on the argument presented by Alan Plantinga?
Which one?
So what's your take on Alan Plantinga?
He has a number of arguments. Which one?
Just mainly on the moral realism. He has many arguments on moral realism. His is epistemically grounding his morality to God, some morally perfect being.
But you'd have to like
So
actually
how do
give one of his arguments because he has a lot. Like he has a free will defense. He has his evolutionary argument against naturalism. He has a whole bunch of them. Like you'd have to tell me specifically which one. Give me the argument.
Sure, you can go with the free will one.
Free will defense. That's his argument that an all good God isn't incompatible with suffering because it's possible that there's some sufficient reason for God to allow suffering. Therefore, evil doesn't disprove an all good God. That argument is false because we can make it so that any possible sufficient reason is capable to achieve without suffering, which disproves his argument. So you just take whatever possible benefit there is, make it optional, and then now you have that benefit in addition to not having suffering, involuntary suffering. And so his argument is defeated, and an evil does disprove the existence of a God.
Yeah. So evil disproving existence of God, because I find it quite ludicrous, to be honest. Because as I read, I was reading his what was his name? Epicurus, if I'm not wrong. Epicurus was the first one to present the problem of evil, if I'm not wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. So,
well, he presented one of them. His is probably the most well known. That's
yeah,
Epicurean quadrilemma. That if God is all good, why is there suffering? If God is
exactly. Then from there we go to Euthyphro's dilemma, the Plato and the debates. So we can so there's a whole map drawn in philosophy where we go from problem of evil to Euthyphro's dilemma, and then people go in circles and circles.
Yeah, but none of those
arguing on.
None of those have anything to do with my argument. So.
Yeah. So what so I think we have someone here. Okay. Carol tea cake. So yeah, TJump, just wait. I think the guy is coming up. So can you just wait for a minute?
Sure. I mean, you can just keep asking questions and they can jump in whenever.
Yeah, I have many questions, but it would take, So Another question I have is on the this argument. If I can share it, I will share in the discussion channel, so you can look it up the argument. So I'm just sharing the argument, so you can.
What's the argument?
Just want to know your take on the argument.
What could you
I
tell me what the
want you to
name
read
is?
everything from the argument. Just the premises of the argument. What is your contention on the argument? Just a minute. Let me just pull it up.
Did you just read it or say it?
Sure, I can read it. Yeah. So the argument goes like this. This is the problem of evil. So my friend, he tried, the argument contra problem of evil from omnipotence of God. So premise one, he puts, if God is omnipotent and can do that which is logically possible, then God can use evil instrumentally to perfect the world mutatis mutandis. The
Yep.
Thomsic, yeah, mutatis mutandis, had there been none. So I think I'm, pronouncing it incorrectly, but it's quite common in, Thomsic, literature.
Yeah,
If you
so
read
that
Thomas Aquinas.
argument is easily disprovable. All you have to do is say that if you can perfect the world without involuntary suffering, then you can gain the benefit without the cost, and that's all you need to do. And since it is possible to perfect the world without suffering, then it defeats the argument.
Yeah, if you're so if you go with that that suffering leads to evil and evil leads to dismissal of God, then that could be quite problematic.
Well, not really. So the argument is that God can use suffering to perfect the world. Like, I can even grant that and say, all right, God can use suffering to perfect the world, but you can also perfect the world without suffering. And since there's a way to do it that's a less immoral way, and God didn't do that less immoral way, then God must be evil. So if just because God could perfect the world with suffering doesn't mean that that's the best way to perfect the world. For God to be perfectly moral, he would have to use the best way, which would be make it optional. So if you can say, give every individual the option, would you like to be a part of this world and have suffering, or would you like to not be a part of this world and not have suffering? That is a more moral option than what God did, therefore God must be immoral.
So if God is morally perfect being and he's evil, so that means there's no God. Is that the nutshell? In a nutshell,
No,
is that the argument?
no, it's God can't both be perfectly good and be evil, because those are two separate things. So either God doesn't exist or God isn't perfectly good.
Yeah, I still can't understand why can't God be evil, omnibenevolent, and omnibenevolent at the same time? Because if God can be both, because
Well, I mean, that's like saying you're a round square. So God can't be both round and square because those are the exact opposite things. So it's like you can't be the opposite thing. God can't be God and not God at the same time. So be omni-malevolent and omni-benevolent those are the opposite things. So you can't be both of them. It's like being all green and all red at the same time. So either you're good or you're evil. You can't be both good and evil. You cut out again. I can't hear you. Can't hear you guys. That's neat. My mic's still working on my end. Anybody else in the room has any questions? All right, testing. Pluto, can you hear me now?
Can you hear me, TJump?
Yep, I can hear you now, Pluto.
Sorry, I think I got disconnected. So I was actually going about the argument. I was actually trying to read out the argument so you could get the whole picture.
Well, I don't need the whole argument. All I need to do is find one flaw in one premise, and then I can reject the entire argument. So the problem is that
So your first premise, you find it problematic, so you rejected the first premise.
yep, I can just say that it doesn't matter if God could create evil. If there's a better option and God didn't do the better option, that disproves God. So because there is definitely a better option, which we can prove exists, then that proves God could not be all good and choose to do the lesser good option. Because if God's perfectly good, he has to do the most good option. And so if he did an option that is less good, then he's not perfectly good.
Mm-hmm. So why can't we just say that God is not perfectly good? So why can't an all evil God exist? That's my problem. So why can't there be
there could be an all evil God? That's possible too, but it can't be both all good and all evil. You have to pick one. Either God is all evil and you shouldn't worship him because
all
he's evil, or he's but he can't be all good, because if there's an all good God, then because there's a better option, he didn't do it.
Mm-hmm. So if you say that God is both good and evil, so that would entail a contradiction. Is that what your contention is?
Yeah, you can't say God is both good and evil, or not entirely good and entirely evil.
Yeah, so that's what most, I think, philosophers say, that God is both good and evil. So even in our Islamic theology, we have this concept that there's good and evil. Since I think many Christians, they reject evil, as I've heard. So they actually reject their evil even exists. So they go with the privation theory, if I'm not wrong. So we don't go for the privation theory. Few philosophers of few Islamic philosophers do go for privation theory, but mostly Orthodox Muslims, they don't go for the privation theory. They actually accept that evil exists and good exists, and with that they actually end up going towards an all loving and all, not all loving, but we go with, and just in contrary to all loving, we just say that he is all just. So all just, we actually relate all just God with an all evil God. So that's how we just go around. We just say all good
if you
God.
admit that God is not perfectly good and is also evil, that's perfectly fine. Then there's not a contradiction there. So the only argument against like the problem of evil is that there can't be an all perfectly good God. So if you're admitting God isn't perfectly good and is partially evil, that's fine.
Yeah, we say that God. Now, to few people, just I don't know about all of, but they say that God can be evil and God could be good. So he uses evil, this omni-malevolence, to ensure to be there. Actually, both good and evil are used for the chaos in the world. So what they use is that good and evil go side by side.
Okay, so that's fine. You can just admit that God is evil, and then I would say he's not worthy of worship. He's worthy of condemnation. We shouldn't believe in him. We should, if there was a God that existed that did do all of these things deliberately, then he's an evil God, and we should try to destroy him as much as possible. He's not someone we should worship because he's evil. Like if he's an evil God, we shouldn't believe in him. We shouldn't worship him, even if he existed.
God being evil doesn't not necessarily entail that, but it entails that God being making evil just means that he's using that evil to make more good. So what we say is that he just uses evil as an instrument to make more good. So if you know what I mean.
So if it says God created evil in the Bible too, but that's not the point. The point isn't God created evil. God forced us to have evil without our consent, which is itself evil. So if God did an evil thing himself, he isn't worthy of worship. He's a monster that we should not believe in. We should not worship him. He's an evil monster. So if God did
can
evil,
you just back a little bit? You said that God created us without consent. If I'm not mistaken. Did you just said that?
No, God forced us to have evil without our consent. So he created us in this world without our consent.
So let me put it this way. So God forced us to have evil. So what you're saying is that God has taken away our free will and enforced upon evil upon us. Is that?
No.
Yeah.
So if God created me and he put me in this world with evil and I didn't get a choice in that, that's evil.
Mm-hmm.
If he did that, that itself is evil, and God is evil, and God should be condemned. So what God should have done, if God was worthy of worship, would be to create me and give me the option. Would you like to be in this world with evil, or would you like to not be in this world with evil? And because he didn't do that, then God isn't worthy of worship. He's not someone we should worship or listen to at all.
Mm-hmm. So what I understand is that God being evil, just being evil, is not worthy of worship.
Yes.
Even the slightest bit of being evil is not worthy of worship. Is that your point?
Yes.
So then ultimately you're rejecting the point which I actually made. That was that evil is used instrumentally to remove greater evil and to ensure.
So remember, I agreed with that. I could say even if you can use evil to do good, there's a better way. You could create the good without using the evil. And so if he's using the evil, it's like, for example, if I could, let's suppose you had an infection in your leg. I could cut your leg off to stop the infection from killing you. So I'm using the pain to save you.
Exactly.
But I could just give you a shot. Exactly. Like I could give you an antibiotic shot and then save your leg and save you from the bacteria. So if I choose to cut your leg off, even when I could give you a shot instead, that's immoral. Like if any doctor did that, we would immediately throw him in prison because he caused you unnecessary suffering. So if God is like the doctor and he says, I'm going to cut your leg off and use the evil to save your life, instead of just giving you a shot, God's evil. We would throw him in prison.
Okay. So yeah, I understand. So what we go around is how we go around is that God is evil and good. So what we say is that God is using just what I said, that God is used. So what our theology says is that this world is a test. So what we so as a test, there has to be evil and good to exist. So the what our philosophy says is that the whole world is in chaos, total chaos. Good and evil both exist simultaneously, and it only entails that there has to be a world where there's all good, and there has to be a world with all evil. So then we actually go deductively towards a model realism. You know what I mean.
I think what he meant to say was that in this world, for us to do good, there has to be, say someone is suffering, right? He needs medicine, right? So we buy medicine for him and we provide it to him. That is an act of charity. And I think that's what he's saying, that if everything was good, right, there wouldn't really be a test.
Okay, but none of that has anything to do with what I said. So what I said was that, like, if I'm a doctor and I could choose to cut your leg off and save your life, so I'm using the pain to do good, or I could choose to give you a shot, like an antibiotic shot, and save your life. Now, one of those causes you to permanently lose your leg. So I've cut your leg off. You've lost your leg forever. You obviously didn't want that. You want to keep your leg. So if I choose to cut your leg off instead of giving you the antibiotic, that's evil. That's me doing something wrong. And so if God is the same thing, if God chose to cause us more suffering than is necessary, instead of choosing the thing that causes us less suffering to get the same goal, then God must necessarily be evil. So if I can show that God...
Evil based on what?
So if I can show that what God chose to do was not the best option, he chose to cut your leg off instead of giving you the shot, then I can prove God is evil and not someone you should worship.
So wait, all right, I get what you're saying. So, but you're claiming that God is evil, right? And
Yes.
I'm just asking out of curiosity. I'm not a part of this debate, right? I'm just asking on your methodology.
This is not a debate, brother. This is not a debate.
Yeah.
We were just having an
All
All right,
exchange. So
we're just discussing.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's an open
So-
conversation, so you can ask whatever questions you
Yeah,
want.
all right, that's fine. That's
You like.
better. That's better. On what basis do you claim God is evil? If he does anything, let's say.
No, bro. We have gone past that. So
No,
what
it's
we are
fine, it's
discussing
fine.
right
Like,
now is
he wasn't here for that
Sure.
part. So I
Sure.
believe in
Ah.
objective morality without God, like most philosophers. So most
Okay.
philosophers are atheists in America, at least. I don't know about in Pakistan, but so they believe in morality without a God. Morality is like a law of nature, just like any other law. It exists without any need of a God, like gravity does. So we can say there is an objective morality. We don't need a God for that, and we can judge morality based on that. Your phone is ringing. I think Pluto, your phone. We can hear it all.
All right.
But-
I'm actually gonna leave the discussion because I completely disagree with what you just said about most of philosophers agreeing that objective morality exists, such as law
Well,
of gravity.
you can,
So I don't think there's going to be anything productive when
Well, no,
I talk.
that's a
So,
fact. Like you can literally
have a
look at
good
the
day.
surveys. You can look at the surveys.
Yeah, all right.
Phil Survey's paper.
yeah, you can
Yeah,
look up
public.
moral realism, brother.
Yeah,
You will
it's-
understand what we are coming from.
So it's you don't get
All
an
right.
opinion on it. It's
Goodbye.
literally there's a surveys of most philosophers. They literally say most of us are moral realists. It's called the Phil Survey's paper.
Exactly. You cannot, even I remember a philosopher said that if you even try to argue against moral realism, you are a moral realist, one way or the other. I think his name was something. He was if I'm not mistaken, he was a Scottish philosopher, if I'm not mistaken. So, there are a lot of names. So
Yeah.
keeping track of all the names is not.
That's fine. Yeah, there's a lot
it's
of
not. It's not my thing.
lots of philosophers who are moral realists. Yeah, that guy was just being
Exactly,
silly,
so-
saying I disagree, and then not accepting the evidence that yeah, actually there's polls that actually show this is a fact. You don't get to agree or disagree. It's just they get to tell you, and you get to say yes, okay.
Yeah, it's quite funny. So quite funny that I was just reading this that the other day that even if you argue against moral realism, you end up being a moral realist. so that's how powerful moral realism is. So even seeing now atheists coming up with moral realism because it was not quite prevalent among atheists coming as moral realists.
Well, actually, it's
yes.
always been pretty prevalent. It's only the popular atheists, like the public, they're the ones who aren't as much moral realists. All the philosophers are usually moral realists. Like even the big atheists, like Sam Harris is a moral realist. So it's pretty.
So you
it's a pretty
consider
common
Sam
view.
Harris a big atheist?
Yes, absolutely. Sam Harris is one of the four horsemen of new atheism.
Oh, sorry, new atheism. Okay. I thought just generally atheism. Okay.
Well, yeah, even general
Yeah.
atheism also were always moral realists. So moral realism has always been one of the major viewpoints. It was never like a minority.
Yeah. So I have read Moral Landscape, and I read the criticism on Moral Landscape.
Yeah, I
So,
don't agree with Sam
I'm quite
Harris's
aware.
view of it, but most atheists have always been moral realists. You've never needed a god for morality.
Yeah, he actually argued for objective morality. So we know it.
So, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, but I don't think it would be quite, productive if we are, talking to one another. I expected people to, join up, but I think this is quite late here in Pakistan, so I think people might not join.
Well, we have a lot of
as
people in
their
the
mother
chat.
tongue.
There's about 12 or so in the chat right now.
Yeah, I think we will have to do this some other day in a YouTube, quite if many people might come up in my channel if you are up at that time I might have some guests around. So I think we can go about some philosophical discussions. I'm quite into philosophy, so I just wanted to share my philosophical thoughts. So just wanted to know your views on it.
Sure.
So
I mean, I'm here now, so you should
I'm a
just
thinker. So
asking questions now would
sorry.
work.
Sorry. So sorry for for me. You might might get bored.
It's okay.
So
Just ask the questions now, because that's why I'm here now.
so it's not a question, it's just a thought. So the thought is it's quite prevalent in philosophy of science, as people ask that when we say that empiricism is the only truth, this preposition that empiricism is the only truth cannot be proved empirically.
Yeah.
And
we all agree on that. So no one is an empiricist. No one thinks that empirical truths are the only way to get truths. Like obviously 1 + 1 = 2 or A = A aren't empirical. Like no one says empirical truths are the only truths anymore. That's not a thing.
Yeah, I actually know people who actually go about saying that empiricism is the only truth, and unless and until something cannot be empirically verified, it does not exist. Therefore, God does not exist.
Yeah.
That's their argument.
Yeah, no one really says that anymore. So no one is a logical empiricist anymore. It's not really a thing. So we're totally fine with it. You can use evidence of logic to indicate logical things for sure, but logical evidence wouldn't be evidence of God.
No, I'm not talking about general atheists, but I know some few atheists who go about going with this argument. So
you just tell them that that's a silly argument and just ask them like, is
no,
A equals A?
They don't like. You can talk atheist to atheist talk. You can make them pursue, but to me
you can just ask them like, is A = A an empirical truth? The law of identity.
No, talking to them is like talking to a wall, because they actually start off with theology. Whenever I put a philosophical argument, they tend to jump into Islamic theology, and it's quite annoying. So
yeah, I can understand.
They don't actually answer.
Yeah, so
they don't answer the.
Yeah, that's definitely something that many atheists do. Is that when you talk about general philosophical arguments, they want to talk about your specific kind of a God and say all the problems with the Christian God or the
because
Muslim
I to be honest, I actually came about as a philosophical God. Then I came into Islam. So before Islam, I was just in a philosophical God. So I was just saying I was deistic God. I was believing in a deistic God. So I came from a deistic God to a theistic God. So there's a whole journey. I was quite. Yeah, there's a whole. There was. If I'm not. Yeah. So not to go there. So just be on track. I just wanted to ask just last question, and we will just go. So the last question is, how do you define truth? So this is the most fundamental question.
Truth is that which corresponds to reality.
No, what is reality? So, epistemologically, how do you define
reality? Is everything that exists.
So what exists? Because seeing that something exists, how do you know something exists?
That's
you might find it silly.
So reality is everything that exists, and truth is that which corresponds to reality. Like I don't need to know anything exists to define reality. So I can just be a brain in a vat, and those definitions are still correct.
My contention is that we have to assume some things so we have to assume that things exist.
No, like I think therefore I am means I can prove that I exist. So we know for a fact things exist. Like it's impossible for things not to exist.
So no, I'm just trying to understand what reality is, because it's quite just goes over my head. So whenever I go into epistemology, it's quite goes over my head.
Well, I mean, reality,
understanding what truth really is.
Again, reality is just everything that exists. You don't need to know everything about reality to know it's everything that exists. So if there's a God, he's a part of reality. If there's no God, then it's just material, then that's part of reality. So reality is just everything that exists. And truth is like a sentence like there were dinosaurs. That sentence is true because it corresponds to reality. So if the sentence describes reality, then it's truth.
That corresponds to the testimony we get from the archaeologists and people in the field. We get that from testimony. So I was just reading Epistemology of Testimony.
Well, no, it has nothing to do with testimony.
I come to
we
know.
literally have the bones. So if we literally have the bones, it's a fact. There's no testimony, doesn't matter.
No, you don't have. You didn't went to and see it firsthand. You had to rely on some second-hand source. You had to rely on someone's testimony.
I've literally seen the bones. So they're literally.
Oh,
bones.
so yeah. Oh, awesome, great. So yeah, if you literally just went there and saw the bones, so that's great. Because I've seen many atheists claiming that, testimony is bullshit, and we don't need to rely on testimony and inference. So they all go about
sort of not really. So testimony is fine evidence for things that already have an empirical basis. So like if I said I saw a dog, my testimony is good enough. Like, or if you said you saw a dog, I'd be reasonable to believe you. But if you said you saw a unicorn, that would not be reasonable to believe. So testimony is only good evidence if it's in combination with empirical evidence. So if we have I saw X and we have lots of empirical evidence of X, like the DNAs, the fossil record, the taxonomy, phylogeny, how to train them, what they're allergic to, all those kinds of things, then it's reasonable to believe that you saw a dog because we have all of that in addition to your testimony that you saw a dog. But if you gave testimony that you saw a unicorn, it would be unreasonable for anyone to believe you because we would need something else in addition to your testimony. And this is the criterion used in history and in criminology, that if like someone gave their testimony that they waved a magical wand and killed somebody with it, like that would be thrown out of the courtroom because there's no evidence of magic independent of the testimony. But if someone said someone shot someone else with a gun, that would be fine evidence in the courtroom because we have lots of evidence of guns and shooting people. So testimony is only good if it has an empirical basis independent of the testimony of something we already know exists. But testimony isn't evidence of things that we don't have an empirical basis for, like miracles, magic, mythical creatures, the paranormal, supernatural, UFOs. So testimony is perfectly fine as evidence for things that already have an empirical basis.
So pragmatism, the theory of pragmatism, I find it quite amusing. The theory of pragmatism, as pragmatism can be quite correlated with testimony, if I'm not wrong.
I have no idea. It has nothing to do with my model.
Your model, okay. So I think I will have to end this. So if you don't mind, I had a great time with you. So I don't want to take in much of your time. I think I have quite bored you, and sorry for the inconveniences, as I think many people didn't. But I have recorded this, so nice meeting you, TJump.
And nice meeting you too. If anybody else in the chat wants to ask questions, you're free to open up and chat.
I don't think
I don't know anything about philosophy, so I'm not gonna get into it. So contribute to the argument.
No, there were no arguments. We were just having a chat. So you can put up any thought you had.
Yep, anything you want to talk about, that's fine.
I guess not.
Yeah, because I think this time was also not. Yeah, I hope I didn't bore you, TJump. So I think.
Actually, I had a quick question. Would you consider yourself like a local skeptic or a global skeptic?
Local. Global, there's no one's really a global skeptic. Local skepticism just means that you can be skeptical of some claims, but skepticism really doesn't matter at all. We're just I have an epistemology. So I have an epistemology that says this is what qualifies as good evidence, and if it doesn't meet that qualification, then it's not reasonable to believe. So the skepticism really doesn't matter. It's just, does it meet my epistemological standard?
So let me answer that. So let me answer that. So what I go about is go with abductive reasoning. So with abductive reasoning, I come to some reasonable outcomes. So I go about with my personal epistemology, and that's what I find quite reasonable. So
Yeah, that's really interesting because abductive reasoning is actually a fallacy. It's called affirming the consequent. So abductive reasoning is only good for coming up with hypotheses, but it isn't good for justifying those hypotheses. Like if you check the guy who actually invented abductive reasoning, Charles S. Peirce, introduced it to logic. He explicitly said it's
exactly
affirming the consequent. So you can't use abductive reasoning to come to conclusions. You can only use it
Assalamu alaikum.
to come to hypotheses.
Alaikum
Walaikum
assalam.
salam, brother.
Better.
So abductive reasoning can be is quite correlated with doxastic logic, if I'm correct, if I'm not wrong. If you mind correcting me.
No idea.
Is it correlated with doxastic logic?
I have no idea. I think it's just a kind of logic. It doesn't like a kind of argumentation. So
yeah, so doxastic logic is something where we have an argumentation with predicate logic. We go about in modal logic and predicate logic, and we make some reasonable outcomes. Basically, they actually use a combination. They actually use a combination of deductive reasoning and abductive reasoning sometimes. So there's a good balance between abductive and deductive.
Yeah. I mean, all the kinds of logic are all going to be associated with predicate calculus, but that's irrelevant. So again, what I said was that all abductive reasoning is affirming the consequent. It's an affirming the consequent fallacy if you're only using abduction. Abduction can only be used to come up with a hypothesis.
Yeah, do write this name in the chat so I can look it up. Yeah.
Charles S. Peirce? That name?
No, the name of the fallacy.
Oh, affirming the consequent. Which chat? Is it the general chat?
Just discussion chat.
Discussion voice chat?
Chat, just, yeah.
Okay.
Wherever you would like to, just type it. I will just check it out later.
Affirming the consequent. Yeah, and actually, I have an academic paper on this from the philosophy paper published in an academic journal that supports this. Also,
share your papers too. Yeah, like just the website where you put up your papers. I would love to check out your paper.
Yeah, they're all on my Discord. There's the academic papers section. They're in the bottom.
Oh, so you don't upload it on like some open public website like academia or
no, they're all uploaded there, but all of the links to all of the papers are in my Discord. So you have to I don't have them saved. So you have to go to the Discord and then go to the academic paper section, and then it has the links to all of the academic websites and journals where you can find them.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure, go for it.
Sorry to interrupt, but can I ask what do you mean by local and global skepticism?
Global skepticism is like skeptical of everything, like everything you'd be skeptical of. Local skepticism is skepticism of like a few things. Like there's a few things that you can be skeptical of. Only like certain contexts.
I wanted to ask a related question. What do you think of? What do you?
I have. Okay, you can ask. Then I ask after you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can take turns. You can take turns.
So I was gonna ask, what do you think of skeptics? So I'm not sure if you're aware, but I think I saw a couple videos he had with. Do you know who Venus is?
Nope.
He's with Ask Yourself and those other guys. He said something like along the lines like he rejects intuition as a justifier for anything. Like he doesn't like accept intuition at all. So like if you tell him like that's why he doesn't accept like for example moral realism. He doesn't accept moral realism or any sort of belief or view that requires intuition to justify it as a part of it. So does
it depends on what you mean. So I'm fine with that as long as you. Because I'll use intuition as a way to come up with hypotheses, kind of like abductive reasoning. So it's not, you can't say, I have this intuition, therefore it's true. You can say, I have this intuition and I have a hypothesis to explain it, and then I need some independent way to verify that hypothesis. That's perfectly fine. So I would agree with him in that way. But intuition is perfectly fine to come up with hypotheses for. You can totally use intuition for that.
Okay, so I mean, what do you think about the fact that he would reject things that he would consider like for example, like a self-evident thing? Like you accept self-evident things, right? Like you believe that
special feeding fallacy, yeah. Yeah, that could be quite categorized.
intuition-
Would you say that
Intuition-
self-existence is self-evident, or would you
yes.
say that?
So
you-
I
yeah,
exist
okay.
is self-evident, but it's not an intuition. So I don't intuitively believe I exist. I have a direct experience of it. That's not an intuition.
Okay, so you would make a distinction between the experience and the intuition. Okay.
Yep.
So would you say that someone who believes? Sorry, just give me a second.
All right. Somebody else had a question.
Yeah, are
Okay.
you local or global skeptic?
He said local.
Yeah. So
He
I
said
don't.
local, yeah.
So
I don't
what are
identify
you
with
skeptical?
skepticism at all. So I have my own epistemology. I don't need to be a skeptic. So I would
Okay.
fit
Yeah.
into the local skeptic
Personal
category. but it's
epistemology.
irrelevant.
Everyone has their
Let me
personal
speak, please.
epistemology.
I'm asking him. I'm not philosopher, so I need to understand. What is your religion?
Atheists.
Bro, atheist.
Why
He
you
has no
don't believe
religion.
in God?
What would you say? I couldn't
Uh,
hear you.
Why you don't believe in God?
Because there's no evidence. There's no reason to believe in a God.
So he has
So
epistemological groundings on his
I'm asking
belief.
him,
So
not you.
Yeah. I can answer his questions.
What?
So
I'm asking him, not you.
yeah. So what else? So I'm
Sorry,
an
brother.
atheist. I'm an
Sorry,
atheist
brother.
because I don't believe there's any evidence for God. I don't think there's any more evidence for God than there is for Santa Claus or a fairy leprechaun or whatever.
Okay. So,
Did you say
but how
moral evidence?
Any
can I
evidence?
speak, please? I have a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Let this guy talk. He's been waiting for a while. So go for it.
Okay, so first of all, how can you equate the concept of a universal creator with Santa Claus?
Because both of them are imagined. So we can say that every hypothesis starts off as something in your imagination. Like I think a fairy.
Who told you that
Therefore,
God is an imagination?
Wait. Don't interrupt him. Let him finish first.
So-
Let TJump finish.
Every single idea we have starts as an idea. It's literally something in our heads first. So a leprechaun is obviously something we came up
conceivability.
with.
Exactly.
So then we have to ask, well, is it just something in our heads, or does it also exist in the world outside of our heads? So God was obviously something you imagine in your head, just like I imagine like the world is round or whatever. And then we have to show, well, is that true independent of our imagination, or is it just something in our imagination? So everything starts off as imaginary. It has to, because it's an idea in our head.
Quite perfectly put. Yeah.
I actually I don't understand, because when you say
What
the
part
world
did
is
you understand? What part did you didn't understand?
are you the commentator, or like are you the host?
Yeah, Baby Pluto's the
Yeah,
host, but go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah,
Who's the host?
Baby Pluto is the
I'm
host.
not a host, but I am
Okay.
just here as someone. Yeah, you can go on. Sorry.
Because I don't understand what I'm talking to.
I'm TJump, so I'm the guy. I'm the person he invited here. So
Okay. So when you say the world is round, it's like an imagination. Then it's evidence. Then there is evidence for it. Who told you that the first thing was God was an imagination? Then we went from the idea that God exists into trying to find evidence. Why isn't it the other way around?
Because everything starts off as imaginary. So literally anything that we think exists has to come to us in the form of an idea in our heads. Like it can't. Like
Okay, so
Yeah,
for
it has to be
example,
conceivable.
if you go to your house, for example, and find something that is there that wasn't there before, yeah,
okay.
are you gonna say it came here? I don't have proof that someone brought it here. That thing doesn't exist. It's imaginative.
Well, the first thing I have to do is I have to see it, and then I have to build an idea of it in my head. Oh, look, there's a cup here that wasn't there before. So that's an idea in my head. It starts off as an idea. And then we need to go beyond the idea. Well, is it true independent of my imagination, or am I hallucinating? So then I'd have to find evidence, like, is the cup really there? Like, can I touch it? Can I throw it against the wall or whatever? And we say, oh, the cup is really there. So now I have evidence that the cup exists independent of my imagination, but it obviously started as a thing in my imagination. Like, I see a cup. Is it real or is it imaginary? So literally everything starts as, is it something real or is it something just in your head? Because everything has to start as an idea in your head first.
Okay, so as you mentioned that, Do you believe that the matter around everything around us is like, is it real? Like, just go step by step with me, please.
Yes, I think there are real things
Okay.
around us.
Do you believe that it was always there, or like where I'm going, yeah? Like the infinite regress and these things.
Yeah, so I think that nature was always there.
You think that, so you believe in the infinite regress.
Not exactly. So in physics,
So explain.
space-time is emergent from natural things. So the consensus in physics is that space-time came from something else that is natural, that's there. So it's exactly like you think a God is outside of space-time. There are natural things that are outside of space-time.
Like
the amplituhedron, like the emergent space-time models presented by Nima Arkani-Hammad and Sean Carroll. Like, you can check out the actual physics papers on this.
I've seen it. Those 70 model is just to try to avoid the Big Bang problem. That's all. Nothing more.
No, they don't at all try to avoid the Big Bang at all. They literally explain it.
Yeah, it's sidestepping the beginning of the universe. That's all.
So in physics, the beginning of our universe is the Big Bang, but that doesn't mean everything. No one in physics thinks everything had a beginning. It's just our space-time continuum. That's it. So the Big Bang doesn't mean everything had a beginning. It means just our small universe had a beginning, not all universes.
TJump, sorry, I had to. TJump?
Universe. Therefore, we have no evidence for it. What difference is that from God? God is the problem.
Because the models in physics are combinations of principles, particles, and laws that have been verified. So, like the multiverse theory, as one example.
Yeah. But that's all within our universe.
Yeah.
Not outside the universe.
It doesn't need to be outside.
Yeah?
So if we build a theory, wait, don't interrupt. So if we say, look, there's a horse print, or there's like a footprint in the snow, what caused that? And we think, it's probably a horse because we already know about horses. That's a better explanation than saying, it's a unicorn, because there's no evidence of unicorns. If you have a theory that's a combination of things we already have evidence for, that's a better theory than one of new things. So if we have a theory of the universe that's a combination of principles and particles and laws in physics that we already have, that's like saying, the footprint was caused by a horse, which is better than saying it was a god, which would be like saying, the footprint was caused by a unicorn, because we already have evidence of a horse.
I would say it's the other way around. I would say this is the other way around. I mean, everything that you have is from within the observable universe that began with the beginning of the Big Bang, however.
Yeah, you're going with the contingency argument. Yeah, I understand where you're going. You're going with the contingency argument. I understand.
I'm not going to go to the contingency problem. I'm just saying that everything within the universe is within the universe. That it was with the beginning of the Big Bang. Anything that you're suggesting outside of that is no difference than saying, a God created it in reality, because you have any evidence for that. It's you cannot see it, you cannot observe it, you cannot feel it, you cannot do any empirical studies over it. It's just trying to avoid God, which is actually, to me, it's ridiculous, because it's like saying, there is a God. That's Occam's razor. There is a God that created everything.
No, so obviously God is the worst explanation you could use. It's not simple at all, but in physics has nothing to do with a God. We don't even consider a God because God is not an explanation that works. It doesn't do anything in physics. In physics, we're only allowed to use explanations that can make predictions that are based on combinations of things that exist.
Yeah, but you're not making anything. That's the problem. You're not making anything. Those other models, they have no proof or prophecy. It cannot, not for prophecy. Basically, the Darwin's thing, with the moth.
Predictions.
Yeah, prediction. Yeah, the prediction. It cannot make any prediction because we're all within
that's how
observable universe.
So how it works is that you have a hypothesis. You say, I think this is what caused the explanation, and the hypothesis can't make predictions yet, so it hasn't been confirmed, but it's still a hypothesis. So having a hypothesis that the universe was created by emergent space-time and having a hypothesis that the universe is created by a God, those are both hypotheses. But the hypothesis that the universe is created by emergent space-time is only built on things that have already been verified to exist. Like saying, I have a hypothesis, a horse put a horse print in the snow. Obviously, I haven't seen a horse, but my hypothesis that it was done by a horse is better than the hypothesis it was done by a unicorn, because horses we know exist. Unicorns, we don't have any evidence they exist. They're just imaginary. So in the context of physics, if we have evidence that something exists, like emergent spacetime, that's a better explanation than saying a god did it, because we have evidence of emergent spacetime than the parts existing, where we don't have evidence of the god's parts existing.
I mean, like again, like I'm saying, like that's the argument that it's it's gonna be, we're gonna need to observe something like that to confirm it.
Right.
Otherwise,
so the parts we've all observed. The parts.
Can I jump in?
Wait, one sec. The
but
parts.
there is also
wait. Let me finish. So the parts of the multiverse are virtual particles, which have been observed. We've observed them in a lab, and early universe.
Which multiverse are you talking about, if I may? Like,
this is our universe. You can observe them in our universe. That's perfectly fine. That you don't need to observe another universe.
I'm saying like parallel times.
Wait. Stop interrupting. We have observed.
Bro, let TJump finish. Please let TJump.
Yes, you too.
Finish.
Stop interrupting. So, we've observed virtual particles. We know they exist. We've seen them in our labs, in our universe, and we know early universe inflation exists. And that's it. Those two things are what make up the multiverse. They exist in our universe and other universes too. So we know the parts exist. We obviously haven't seen other universes, but we don't need to. All we need to see is virtual particles and early universe inflation, and we've seen both of those things. So those parts, all of the parts in the multiverse theory, have been seen, even if we haven't seen the multiverse itself.
It's just I want to one thing I want clarification for, if I may. Which multiverse are you talking about? Is it the parallel or quantum parallel interpretation?
Sean Carroll's model.
I believe there's only one model multiverse.
TJump?
It's Sean Carroll's model.
But I'm saying, which multiverse is that? Is it like other universes like the Big Bang, or is it the one that's trying to
many worlds? So the many world says that
many worlds.
So the multiverse, lots of universes.
So you're saying both or one or when you said multiverse, can you basically I want to know which one?
Multiverse and many worlds are two separate things. The multiverse only means many universes, so just the lots and lots of universes. The many worlds
I'm familiar with that.
is a different thing.
Oh, okay. Because when we talk about virtual particles, from my understanding, it would fit better into the many worlds rather than multiverse.
Well, no, it fits into all of them, so it doesn't. All of the different models explain all of the evidence. There's not one it fits better or worse into.
No, because with the many worlds, you didn't need the parallel universe.
No, the many worlds is the ones that do have parallel universes. Multiverse has no parallel universes. They're all just far away. So many worlds is the parallel universes one.
Okay. Can any of them answer the thermodynamic problem? Equal MC square, in that way, I'm sorry if I'm using the wrong terms. I'm not specialized.
Which problem? E equals MC squared is Einstein's equation for
special
relativity.
But
mass energy equation.
Mass,
Are you asking,
can I barge in, please?
Let me finish the question.
So are you asking about the second law of thermodynamics? Is that problem?
I'm not exactly sure. We have matter. But matter has no cause for its existence, to our best understanding.
Well, matter comes from fields. So energy has always existed. Matter is just a
Higgs boson field. We got Higgs boson field. We get matter and mass.
I don't think that's related to it. From my understanding, the Higgs field is telling you why matters cannot go to the speed of light. That they're slowed down.
The Higgs field explains how matter has mass, but matter hasn't always existed.
Exactly.
So matter comes from fields. Fields have always existed. So the Big Bang started with no matter and all fields.
Quantum fluctuations. I've read not Lawrence Krauss book. He actually explains using quantum fluctuations. Yeah, Kraussian nothing. It became quite a meme in the academia. I remember that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying has nothing to do with Lawrence Krauss. Like everyone in the Big Bang model accepts that particles didn't exist other than like electrons, which are waves. So it just started with electrons, and then those collapsed into heavier particles like hydrogen and helium, and those got turned into stars. And so it started with no particles; it was just energy.
So you're talking about the multiverse would need multi-Big Bangs, right?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, that's how I think the model explains multiverse. If I'm not,
but
sorry.
doesn't virtual particles have a problem of their own? Like the
No.
virtual particles, they always end up, giving zero energy to the system.
Yeah,
Yes,
they don't. They don't.
They pop in, but
No one
they
says
don't
that
add anything or
need
remove
to.
anything.
You don't need. Well, they add particles. They add a particle and an antiparticle, and so they add up to zero energy total because the antiparticle has -1 and the positive particle has +1. But you can build a whole bunch of universes out of positive particles. So there's a net zero energy total, but you can still have.
But we do not see them other than popping into in and out of existence. We never see them get separated.
Actually, we do. It's called Hawking
quantum
radiation.
fluctuation.
So Hawking radiation is when you have a particle and an antiparticle that it hops into existence, and one of them gets sucked into a black hole, and the other one gets shot off, and now they don't collapse again, so they're just separated.
Yeah, but the Hawking radiation are a bit different. You're losing something to gain these.
What?
You are losing something. Yes, you are losing something because the black hole itself evaporates.
Yeah,
and
so a particle and an antiparticle come into existence. The positive particle goes into the black hole and hits another negative particle. The negative particle shoots off in a different direction. So it doesn't.
At the end, there is no additional energy to the system.
You don't need to add additional energy. No one's claiming you're adding additional energy. What happens is if you separate a positive particle and an antiparticle, you can separate them all and build all of the positive particles into a planet. So you're not adding any energy to the system, but you can still build a planet out of it because you have a planet of positive energy and a planet of negative energy. So the net total is still the same. You haven't added any energy to the system, but you can still build planets and stars and everything we see. You just have both positive and negative energy.
But the negative goes to, they end in a way.
What?
They stop existing. The negative stops existing because there is an exchange.
No. So again, if you have two particles that separate, a positive and negative, and they go in different directions, and it happens a whole bunch of times, you can have a whole bunch of particles that are positive in one side and a whole bunch of particles that are negative on another side, and you can build planets. Like they don't stop existing until they collapse.
But the black hole does stop existing at some point.
This has nothing to do with the black hole. So if you have a positive and negative particle, virtual particles, then and they separate, like in the case of a black hole, then you have a positive and negative particle that are both going to exist until they collapse. So
however,
the black hole is irrelevant.
However, observing to separate without the losing mass, in the case of black hole, you're losing mass.
The black hole is irrelevant. It doesn't make a difference. So the only thing we're saying here is that you can have a virtual particles where there's a particle and an antiparticle, and they both pop into existence, and they separate, and you build planets. It's very simple. It's irrelevant.
I don't think you get what I mean. I don't think
that's quite circular reasoning. Circular reasoning. Yeah, you're just going round and round.
That's what circular reasoning is, but
self.
Well, I'll think for some time. So sorry guys for interrupting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to barge in and actually wanted to actually switch, divert this to something else. I just wanted to go, if TJump is familiar with the holographic principle, holographic emergent
it's the principle
argument.
No, holographic principle has nothing to do with consciousness. The holographic principle is that all of the information in a 3D space can be represented on a 2D sphere.
On a 2D sphere.
Yeah, a 2D surface.
And from that 2D, exactly. Then actually I was watching I think IP. Yeah, I was watching IP.
IP
Inspiring philosophy.
is completely ignorant of physics, so you shouldn't watch anything he says. The holographic principle has nothing to do with consciousness. Like, everyone in physics says IP
Mhm.
is wrong. He's been made fun of by many physicists. Like, no, he doesn't know anything about
Yeah,
physics.
I was quite intrigued by his argument, which he actually put up against Ridwan, apostate prophet. The second argument where he goes about that how consciousness can be related to, you know, quantum. What was the? Yeah, I actually forgot the argument, but I think it was quite related to how universe is a conscious itself and how it emerged. So therefore, God exists. So I remember that. Not perfectly remember this argument, but he actually cited a lot of credible physicists and quantum physicists.
Yeah, IP, what he
particles.
does is he cherry picks a few papers that nobody in physics accepts, because you can publish papers on anything and then cites them as if
Exactly.
they're supported, because they're not. So he cherry picks a few academics who he thinks agree with him, which they don't, and misrepresents their papers as if they're somehow significant work in the field of physics, which they aren't. And so again, everyone in physics, just no one agrees with what he says. He's just it's very silly what IP says.
Can I ask you
Yeah.
a question? Can
Sure
I
you
ask
can.
you a
Sure you
question?
can. Yeah.
So,
Sure you can.
TJump, are you a scientific realist or anti-realist?
Realists.
Oh no, that's very irrational.
That's the consensus in science. So you'd have to try and show why that's irrational.
That's
Hmm.
can you substantiate that?
Yeah, Phil Survey's paper. You can just Google Phil Survey's paper results. 80-something% are realists.
Oh no. Okay, thanks.
I think it's more likely that you're confused about realism, not that it's irrational.
Yeah. No, you should just go and just look up realism. God, it's quite intriguing and just interesting when you just go into realism and understand what realism is what actually about. So TJump, without any further ado, I would just like to wrap it up.
Well,
So if anyone
that's
has,
fine. Like, I'm going to hang out for a while longer, and anybody else has any questions, they can ask them. You can go if you want, though.
so I just wanted your feedback on what have did you like
Yeah, it was a lot
this
of fun. Thanks
Discord
for
server
inviting
or
me.
people? No, we have a lot of philosophers here too. We have Jib. He's a philosopher. He's a quite into philosophy, and you might have fun talking to him too. And he's a fun guy, so
Yeah, okay.
you
Anybody
might
else?
get along with.
No, that's cool. Does anybody else have any questions?
What do you think about the Kalam
I'm
cosmological
drawing
argument?
a diagram actually. I'll get back to it later.
Okay, one at a time. What was your question?
So, how do you deal with the Kalam cosmological argument
The Kalam argument
or the
says
contingency?
I think everyone
Wait,
knows the
don't interrupt.
criticism.
Don't interrupt, Pluto. Let him. I'll answer the question. So the Kalam argument is that everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe has a cause. Or the universe began to exist. The universe has a cause. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to grant that, but that cause could be a natural thing. It doesn't need to be a god at all. So I'm happy to grant that part of the Kalam and the contingency. Like, there has to be one necessary thing that grounds the foundation of everything. Like, yeah, I can grant that, but it can be a natural thing. You don't need a god to answer the Kalam or the contingency argument. Those could be purely
Yeah,
natural.
but to go against that, you could say that it began to exist. It has to have a will. It can't be something that just
Why do you think
I'm just
that?
gonna exist
Because no one in
because it
philosophy or
had a
physics agrees
beginning.
with that.
Because it had a beginning. If it didn't have a beginning, or it at first it ceased to exist and then it existed, therefore it didn't used to exist, which means something basically that it has to someone willed it to come into existence. I can't explain it well.
Yeah,
Someone here probably could explain.
you'd have to explain that more, because no one in physics or philosophy thinks you need a will for things to come into existence. Quantum mechanics causes things
If
to
it
come
was
into existence.
natural, then let's say it's a causal, right? So let's say something natural is the cause for the existence of
Yep.
the universe.
Yep.
Then it also would have had to, like, it would have existed simultaneously, and if it's a necessary being, then Yeah, if it's a necessary being, then the universe would have always existed, but it hasn't because infinite regress, and so it
Uh,
must have had a world.
so yeah, again, I'm not
I can't
following.
explain the argument. Yeah, someone else will explain it better if he's online.
So like the William Lane Craig version says that there has to be something outside of space and time to have created the Big Bang. The only things that we know of that are outside of space and time are minds and abstract objects. Abstract objects can't cause anything, therefore it was a mind. Now, clearly that's a stupid argument because we don't know of any minds that exist outside of space-time. They all exist in time. So it's unreasonable to think that a mind caused anything related to the Big Bang. It's far more reasonable to think that it was caused by virtual particles, which we do know exist outside of space-time and are causal. Like, obviously, I agree abstract objects can't cause anything, but no one in physics or philosophy agrees with William Lane Craig or that there's a mind that caused the universe. That just makes no sense at all. Like every mind, all of our evidence for minds is that they're physical, just like potatoes or pineapples or rocks. There's no evidence that there's a non-physical mind.
Okay, question. What's the mind? What's the tool? Well, what's the mind? What is the mind? Like, if you want to describe the mind, what is it? The tool law. Like that's what a mind is.
What are you asking? What about a mind?
Like the mind, it's a physical thing. It's an object. Yeah,
yes.
But what is it the tool of? Like, why?
What is it the tool
is
of?
The mind there? Yeah.
Evolution.
Tool of.
I don't know what you mean.
Is that your description? Like, so how do we use the minds? Like, why? Or how is it used?
To benefit survival.
To benefit, so that's it.
Yeah, like brains evolved specifically in order to help things to survive, just like wings did and arms did and hearts did. They all just help you survive better. That's their purpose.
So when you so when your brain tells you, like, you go and enjoy your life, go drink alcohol, do drugs, do things that actually harm you, is that helping survival?
Yes, those desires that we have to pursue things that we enjoy are desires that were beneficial to evolution. So like when things tell you to eat sugar, like your brain says, oh, sweet things, I really like sugar. The reason it says that was because 2,000 years ago, before we had agriculture, sugar was really rare. And so we had these cravings for these things that were high in nutrients that kept us alive longer. And so it kept us alive to have those cravings because we went to go eat the sugary things, which gave us nutrition that kept us full for longer. Now, of course, because we have an abundance of sugar, if we eat as much as we want, it'll cause us to get very unhealthily fat. But before, when we didn't have access to those things, that desire was extremely beneficial. It kept us alive. So the same thing applies to all of the different desires that we have, is that it used to be beneficial because things were very rare and we had to have a motivation to go and get those rare things. And now, of course, because we have an abundance of them, they're detrimental to us, but they were exactly beneficial to our lives, which is why they evolved.
So now we're in a state of devolution, maybe?
Well, no, because evolution has to do with gene allele frequency. And so right now we're in a state of abundance where our desires are easily met. And
adaptation.
So they're not very beneficial.
Speak.
But yeah, it's not evolution.
Hold on, let him speak, guys. I'm having a conversation here.
Yeah, it's not devolution. It's just adaptation from evolution. It's still evolution. There's no devolution there.
No, it's because the thing of you were saying long ago, you're giving this explanation, and that's your opinion about, like, why we crave sugars, and that's how evolution works and stuff. But now, because everything is in abundance, yeah.
Yeah, it's not devolution. That's the evolutionary consensus in biology. That's why we crave sugar.
Okay, so like, no, I gave that term, just made up because, like, I don't find it matching because what's happening now, because when you say evolution, it should be an ongoing process, yeah.
Yeah.
And I believe evolution is not a global thing, yeah. Like it's a singular thing for every organism. Like you want to pass on to the other generation. It's not like you want your whole country, or you get what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, but that's actually
you and your genes. You want to pass them down. You want to pass them over to the next generation.
Yeah, but so it doesn't actually work that way. It's not selfish like that. For example, if you share your genes with a brother or a sister, and then you have a nephew and a half removed nephew, the further they are away from your family, the less you care about them essentially in biology. So biology does actually mean that you want to help the genes of people who are near to you to survive. It's the Selfish Gene book. Richard Dawkins wrote about this. So genes do
I'm
actually
familiar
affect
with it.
groups, not
I
just
don't
individuals.
believe in that.
I'm
I
sure you
find that a bit
don't.
awkward.
I don't. It's fine if you don't believe in it, but everyone in biology does. All of the scientists do. All of the people who understand reality do. So you may want to understand their position to try and
I
refute
mean,
it if you don't believe it.
yeah,
Because
but
life
it's
says
just
otherwise, like life and history says otherwise.
Not really. It really doesn't.
like I've studied evolution, and yeah, I would say I understand it here. I'm qualified. I would say I do not reject it, in fact. But the problem is, like, evolution itself is not. Let me correct this. Common ancestry is not empirical, so that's why you see the answer of Richard Dawkins, why the selfish gene is not technically selfish, but you can basically there is no way to disprove that argument. That's the problem.
Well, there's actually lots of ways to disprove it, and it is in fact empirical. So it's been proven. Like
No, common ancestry. Well, like you give another reasoning, and if it works, then that's fine.
no, like we've literally observed
every
it.
mechanism.
So
Huh?
we've literally observed common ancestry through evolutionary processes.
Yeah. I do not reject common ancestry. I like I said, I believe in it. The problem with it is the problem with Richard Dawkins' solution is that you could answer anything that way. Like if something shows up, if a new question pops up, something like the time of the selfish gene, there was no real good explanation for the selfish gene. However, like any explanation would fit at that time with the an explanation that could answer it is acceptable. That's the problem.
You'd have to take that up with Richard Dawkins. I don't know enough about his position to be able to argue that.
You get what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, it's and I actually accept it, but I don't think it's quote unquote scientific. That's the problem with how Thomas Kuhn answered Karl Popper, because common ancestry itself cannot be tested. It's observable, but cannot be tested. Therefore, any answer that could answer that question is kind of acceptable. Again, like this is,
if it's observable, I think that's observable and testable are kind of the same thing.
I mean, I know what you're saying, but observable only proves that what you observed did happen. You see? Again, like I said, I'm not trying to refute common ancestry because I accept it. The other thing, what I'm just saying is, any answer there would fit. It's not really scientific.
Yeah, empiricism is used for verification. So
yeah, empirical observation. It's observation.
Yeah, empirical observation. Scientific, methodological, naturalism.
Somebody else
I
have a
want to make
question?
a quick correction.
Sure.
I want to make a quick correction about the.
Go for it. What is your comment?
Me? Okay.
Anybody?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear
Because
you.
last time I was speaking to
can.
myself the whole time. Okay. So I want to ask. So you said that you accept that experience is like self-evident, so you could just justify that you exist or whatever.
Yes.
By the way, obviously I accept that I exist and that other minds exist. I'm talking about other skeptics I spoke to. So how would you say you justify other minds existing? Would you just say that your experience is just reliable? You just accept that
induction.
just as a matter of fact?
So I just say induction. I'd say that I experience, I exist, I have these properties, and I can test to see if you have similar properties, and if you do, I can just inductively conclude you have experience, even though I can't directly observe your experience.
So, you would justify it through induction?
Yes.
The other minds exist?
Yep.
Huh. Could you explain that maybe in a different way if you can? Because I'm not really.
Sure. So I have conscious experience. And so what is my conscious experience like? I see colors and sounds and hear stuff, and I can think and process through things. And so if I can ask you questions like, can you see this? I hold up a card that has a specific number on it or whatever. And you say, yes, I see the number 5. Like, oh, you see things in the same way I see things. So I just like I have experience, you probably have a similar experience.
Okay, I think I get that. I get that now. But would you say that you make like a distinction between the mere fact that you experience something and what you experience is real?
Yes, absolutely. So we could all be like, it could all be a hallucination. So what I'm experiencing could absolutely be wrong, but the fact I'm experiencing obviously couldn't be wrong. So there's definitely a difference between the fact I'm experiencing and whether or not what I'm experiencing is real.
Okay, so how would you say that you like justify that, like that part, the part where everything you're experiencing yourself is real, not the matter of fact that you're just experiencing?
So that would be a follow-up. So first we start with the fact that I'm experiencing, I think, therefore I am. And then we can see there's some difference between my imagination and my experience. Like if I imagine a unicorn, I don't see a unicorn. So there's a difference between these two things. And we need to come up with some methodology to differentiate. Well, is anything that I'm seeing of the real kind, or is it of the imaginary kind? And the method we do that with is science. So we say science can effectively differentiate imagination from reality. And so I use science to tell whether this thing I'm seeing is if it's a real thing or if it's an imaginary thing.
Okay, I understand. But when you say something like imaginary, so for example, like a concept like, let's say, unicorn, or in your case, you would also put God in that case as well. And then you would say, let's say, a tree, because a tree you can directly see.
Yep.
This all would assume that your experiences are already like, reliable to begin with. So you can even make the distinction between imaginable and real. So how would you justify that leap? Because I'm asking this because skeptics would usually say for pragmatic reasons, like the ones I spoke to, they'd be like, oh, it's just pragmatic to like believe.
Well, again, so I don't need to assume the reliability. So if I imagine a unicorn and I don't see a unicorn, that's a fact. I'm not assuming the reliability there. I'm saying that there is a difference between my imagination, which I'm imagining a unicorn, but I don't see a unicorn. So there must necessarily be a difference between those two things. And we need some method that can reliably tell us which one any particular thing is. That's what we use science for. So like if you think you see a unicorn in front of you and you want to know, well, is it really there? Is it something of my sense experience kind, or is it just something in my imagination? We can use science. Science can tell us that. Science can definitely tell us. Science can't tell us if it's like made of matter or made of digital information or made of a brain in a vat. It can't tell us that, but it can absolutely tell us, is that an imaginary thing or is it a real thing in our sense experience? And that's all we need. So as long as we can tell there is absolutely a difference between the things I'm imagining and the things I'm seeing, and we need a method to differentiate, and that method is science, then that's all you need. That tells you that if that thing you're seeing is a real thing or an imaginary thing.
Okay, I understand what you're... Okay, I understand that. Okay, I understand that, but like, let me try to make it more simpler. So just the mere fact that you see things itself, like how do you justify the fact that what you see is even real? That's what I'm asking. I'm not, by the way, a pre-sub, because I think pre-subs are dumbasses, but you know where I'm getting at, like just the epistemology part.
Well, yeah. So like, if you imagine a unicorn right now and you're not seeing one in front of you, there's a difference between those two things. Obviously, like there's a difference between imagination and experience. And all you're saying, if it's real, is it one of the experiential things? Is it one of the things that's out there that can be touched and smelled and seen? Or is it just a thing in your imagination, in your brain somewhere? So that's all you're asking if you want to know if it's real. If it's real, then it's one of the things that's independent of your imagination. And so if you can show, if you have some method that can differentiate between those two things, it'll tell you if it's real. Now, it won't tell you with absolute certainty. Like obviously we could all be a brain in a vat, but it will give you good evidence that it's one of the real things. With a high level of probability, you can conclude, yeah, that's one of the real things because it can be scientifically verified.
Okay, I understand. I'll probably let someone else ask because I don't want to keep asking, because I still don't really get how, like, I mean, I get it, you saying that with the absolute certainty part. So would you say that like when it comes to justifying your, let's say, your perception or senses, would you just kind of like assume that, or what? Like, I don't get that.
Well, no. So
or would you say that your experience?
You can have probability arguments without having 100% certainty. So for example, I can say that this dice will land on a number higher than 1 with a 5 in 6 probability. So I don't have certainty, but I'm not assuming it. It's like literally it's just a fact that it has a higher probability of landing a number above 1 because there's 5 other numbers and they're all equally sized. I don't need to assume it just because I don't have certainty. So in science, this is called fallibilism. Like scientists believe in realism. We're not in the matrix. We exist. We're not brains in the vats because of fallibilism. We have evidence that concludes our reality is real, that we're not a brain in a vat, that we can describe things about reality because we have testable predictions. Like if we say, like if reality was just a part of our brain and we're like a brain in a vat or whatever, then we shouldn't expect that anything we imagine should be possible, essentially. But it's not the case. Like most of the things we imagine are wrong. Only a very small percentage of the things we imagine are correct, which means our imagination and the reality outside of our imagination are very separate things. And if we have some method that can get it right a lot and tell us about reality very accurately and get it right more often than our brain does, that's a pretty good evidence that that method tells us about reality itself, not just our brain in a vat imagination. Because science does that, it gives us good reason to believe that there is a real world out there, even though it's not certain, even though, just like it's not certain that the dice is going to roll higher than a 1.
Okay, I understand. All right, thank you.
Yep.
So, with that being said, I have just a quick question to clarify something.
Go for
it. So, you, in belief, are you 100% certain that a wise or like a conscious being did not bring everything into existence?
No, I'm 99.99999% certain.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to hear.
Okay, I wanted just to make a quick correction that the evolution, according to the dictionary, is that it's evolutionary degeneration from its biological branch. However, this is not the case, and the reason why I chose adaptation is because in biology, it's literally the process of change by which an organism or species becomes better suited to its environment, and this is relative to time and place. So the better word to use here is adaptation, not evolution. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah. I think I was confused by the same thing because devolution is a technical term. It doesn't mean just less adaptation. So yeah, you're correct. That would be, evolution was confusing there.
No, I'll send you some diagrams if you can post them in general, please.
Anybody else got any questions?
No, I'm talking to the admin.
Yeah, I figured. So I was just, if anybody else here has any questions.
I do, but it's because I want to explain my view, by the way, explain what I understood. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for that. If you could please post them. No.
Try to ask your question, and I'll check the diagram later.
I don't know how to post. I can't download it.
Oh, okay. Do you have another model, someone who can post them?
You can try to ask your question. I can probably understand it without the diagram.
Well, I'll post them there in sharing channel. I mean, it would be related to this. Do you believe in the Big Crunch, or at some point that the Big Bang will reverse? Huh?
I believe in the Big Mac.
Yeah, the Big Mac. I believe that the universe is going to come to a heat death and continue to expand. I don't think it's going to reverse.
Yeah, you see, that's the problem here with the virtual.
Give McDonald's blue.
Yeah.
What's the problem? You can just explain it. That's fine.
Well, if you can post them, if you can look at sharing channel, because that's what I understood from. Again, I'm no physicist, but what I understood from Stephen Hawking's radiation. I'll bring you over there. Yeah.
What's your question? So I do.
Yeah, it's basically the matter existed after the Big Bang, right?
Yes.
Yes, and you argued that for matter to exist, so virtual particles can become existent, or can come to existence, right?
Yes.
And that was basically through Hawking's radiation, right?
Hawking radiation is just one example of how particles, virtual particles, can get separated. So they don't come into existence from Hawking radiation. Hawking radiation is how they get separated.
Yeah, that's one of them. But are there other models? Because
Okay, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, there's tons of other models.
Yo, Gibran.
Have they been found?
Yo, Buzaid. Time out.
Oh, sure.
Okay. So yeah, here's our friend, our brother, who's like he's a philosophy major, and he could like kind of get with you into philosophy discussions and stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, here he is, Gibran.
I don't know, like you said the other models, but the other models, they only exist temporarily, right?
What? Like models are things people came up with?
Sorry, but the study of virtual particles. You said that one example is Hawking radiation, but in the others, they're only for a short period of time, not for. They don't just pop into existence forever, and that's it.
Yes. So if you have billions, if you have trillions and trillions of virtual particles, and only some of them separate, then I mean that's all you need. Like it's like if you have a drop of water and most of the drops go back into the ocean. I mean, if you have one
but was that observable?
Yes.
Is that observable?
Yes.
Oh, can you reference the experiment or the?
It starts with a C. Virtual particle experiment. Virtual particle experiment.
Again, I'm no physicist. I'll have to ask my someone in my family to explain the math for me. But
yeah, I do know.
Quick mass.
Yeah, just one thing. With Hawking radiation, you're losing something during the particles, right?
No.
You're losing the black hole?
No.
Yes, you are.
No.
You are.
No, you never lose or gain anything. Energy is always conserved. The virtual
you lose the black hole.
The only point of the Hawking radiation is that it is one example of how you separate a particle and antiparticle. There's lots of different ways to do it. The black hole is irrelevant here. It doesn't make any difference. The only thing is that I need to prove is that you can separate a particle and antiparticle. Here's one way to do it. Therefore, I'm right. That's all you need. Doesn't matter what happens in the black hole afterwards.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. But you're losing the black hole. The black hole does not exist forever.
It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter at all what happens to the black hole.
No, it does. Because
no. My point is that you can have a particle and an antiparticle, and they can separate. If they can separate, they can build up in different locations. A black hole is one way to separate them. That's all that matters. Doesn't matter what happens in the black hole.
Let me rephrase my question. Does any scientific experiment disproves E = MC squared?
What? No, they don't need to. No one says it does.
Then you're exchanging. Not creating out of nothing.
No one said that. No one said that. So if you can create a positive and a negative particle at the same time, then the net total is zero. If you create +1 and -1, even though they're in separate locations.
Yes, and for the Big Bang, you need an anti-Big Bang at some point.
No, you don't.
But you don't believe that.
No, you don't. That's not how it works. So one Big Bang with lots of positives and lots of negatives going in different directions is still zero, but you still have the Big Bang. You don't need an anti-Big Bang. It's not how it works.
Can you say that again?
So like virtual particle, you have a positive particle and an anti-particle, and they go in different directions. That's the Big Bang. There's just a whole bunch of them.
Then there must be an anti-Big Bang.
No. The Big Bang has both the positives and the negatives.
You said they separated, right?
Yes, they separate. They go in different directions.
Yes. But you're saying that it's virtual particle, but virtual particles always add up to zero.
Yes.
They don't just come in existence and are in the space-time.
This is so dumb. So a virtual particle is when a positive particle and an antiparticle come into existence and go in different directions. That's the Big Bang. That's all it is. A whole bunch of little positive particles go in one direction. A whole bunch of different negative particles go in the other direction. It's all in the one Big Bang.
There is something.
Buzaid. Not the time. You can discuss it later. Yeah. Okay.
The experiment is called the Casimir effect.
Casimir. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Somebody else have a question? You mentioned the philosopher guy.
Gibran.
Yeah, I've got no idea what the hell you guys are talking about right now. So it's like, yeah.
Yeah, he's the guy.
What's the discussion on?
I'm an
You guys
atheist.
could discuss God.
Yeah, I'm an atheist. I'm here for a Q&A, open AMA, whatever.
Oh, okay.
Intuition's not accepted, okay? So don't try the KCA. Don't try
Oh,
any
really?
any God argument won't work. So
Oh God, no! Don't tell me.
What? So
What do you do outside of-
intuition can be used as a grounds to make hypotheses, but you can't conclude something is true just because of your intuition. Intuition.
yeah, I'm aware. Like I mean, like for example, you definitely won't accept the first premise of the.
I mean, what do you
For
mean
example,
by
a common
intuition,
argument of
though?
the KCA, right?
Everything
You
that
definitely don't
begins to
accept that,
exist
right?
have a cause. Like that's
Yeah.
fine.
I'm asking you. Not that's an example of an intuition.
That has
But I'm
nothing to
asking
do
you,
with
what
intuition.
is it? No, I'm saying, what is it? Like you're
What-
explaining one example of an intuitive judgment, but I'm asking you, what is intuition? Your definition?
His definition?
You know, your definition.
My definition is just a feeling we get to conclude something. We have a feeling.
Just one question. Sorry, like, can you type the name?
Mujahid,
Because
Mujahid,
the only thing I
Mujahid,
found Brandon this is
Mujahid,
books. Sorry, sorry.
Mujahid, was a mute your microphone.
So then what's the difference between like a gut feeling and, for example, the intuition, for example, that whatever begins to exist has a cause, or that the
That's not an intuition. Whatever begins to exist has a cause in intuition. It's a definitional claim. It has nothing to do with intuition.
what?
So our intuition
What do
is
you mean
the
by definition?
feeling that that's true, but that itself is an argument. So intuitions and arguments are not the same thing.
Okay, but then you're not arguing over a definition of intuition that rationalists hold. Then
No, I use the exact
because
same
I mean,
definition.
generally, I mean, not really. I mean, for example, if you read like Beeler, for example, he says like intuitions are seemings of necessary truths.
Yeah, the seeming, that's the
I
feeling
give
part.
you
So the seeming,
not
the feeling, that's the
necessarily.
intuition part. It's literally what they define it as. The intuition is the feeling that, it seems true. That the feeling, that's the intuition.
They don't say it's a feeling.
Yes, they do. The seeming and
No.
feeling are synonyms. So the seeming of this, that's a feeling.
No, it's not.
Yes, literally they're synonyms. So when it says seeming, he's not meaning like it appears to be the case by our senses. So what does it appear to be like? What is the thing that causes the seeming there? Well, it's feeling. You feel that is the case. It's not like
I mean,
does
as
a
far as I'm
computer
aware,
does a computer have an intuition that comes to the same thing?
The rationalists
No.
don't go and say that. Well, it's first of all a feeling, like a gut feeling that this is true or something like that.
That's exactly what
because
they're
they do make the distinction between, for example, me having the quote unquote intuition that that my wife's cheating on me, right? Versus, for example, logical intuitions.
Yes, so there's different kinds of intuitions. That's fine. What does it have to do with it?
But when we're talking about rational intuitions, we're not talking about some gut feeling here. We're talking about
that's fine.
That when we
Okay.
think of the proposition, it is self-evident true. Like it seems to be the case that it's true, but the seeming is not a
the
gut
same.
feeling.
Seems is not the same as self-evident. But what is this? How is this relevant to anything related to my position?
Well, I mean, the thing is that what you're calling intuition is very different from how rationalists would argue
No, because I was just when I said give a definition, or when you said give a definition of intuition, I gave a definition that fits both. So it fits both the rational kind and the feeling kind. So, but again,
No,
you would
because-
have to like show how this has anything to do with any point I made or anything in my position. It's just give a definition of intuition is irrelevant. I just gave a general definition. So what does this have to do with anything?
Well, because for example, like if you want to give like another example, someone like Beeler, for example, it only relates to necessary truths. So mainly an intuition cannot
Intuitions
refer to
only relate to
Yes.
necessary truths?
necessary truths.
Okay, well that's dumb. So I totally reject that silly definition.
Well, on virtue of what?
Because I can have intuitions that are wrong, so they're not necessary truths. Like wow, we have all
But if
kinds
they
of
were,
intuitions.
I mean,
people have
like-
moral intuitions. Moral intuitions could be wrong. They're not necessary truths. Like that's a dumb definition. Like everyone in
on, I
philosophy
mean,
accepts
by-
that moral intuitions are a thing, and no one thinks it's a necessary
course.
truth. That's a dumb definition.
but that would intuit. For example, if we intuit, for example, murder is wrong, that would be a necessary truth in all possible worlds.
No one thinks that's the case. Like a necessary truth is something that must necessarily exist in all possible worlds. And that's not the case. Like there's many different interpretations of morality where it's subjective and relative, and that if a God commands it, that it's not wrong. So there's lots of examples where people think that it's not a necessary truth. So that doesn't make any sense.
Well, hold on. I mean, if you're talking about like divine command theory, I mean, they hold, for example, that at least in the Western tradition, divine commands are rooted in God's nature. So I mean,
yes,
so it would be rooted in that.
So that claim, killing people is wrong, would not be a necessary truth. So that disproves your point. So, but again, you haven't tied this into anything relevant at all. So how you define, I don't care how you define intuition. You can define it however you want. What argument does that lead to? How does this work in any way towards evidence of a God?
Well, because the main point is that if you're going to just say that, an intuition is that, for example, whatever begins to exist has a cause is just the feeling that we have, then it's hard to see how that is grounds to anything.
Well, I granted that. I can grant everything that has a beginning has a cause. I don't call that an intuition. I call that just a logical truth. It's just a consequence of the definition. But that's irrelevant. So
what do you mean by logical? It's true by definition.
Yes. It's analytic truth. So it's true by definition. That has nothing to do with intuition. But again, how you define intuition, how I define intuition don't matter at all. How does this lead to an argument? Because I'm granting, I agree with you. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. Whether I call it intuition or not doesn't make a difference. Like I agree. So how is this evidence of a God?
Well, again, the issue comes back to what I was talking about here. It's hard to see here on your view then that intuitions are grounds to anything, right? Like for example, the example I because I like Bueller a lot is that he gives intellectual seemings.
Well, intuitions don't matter on my view. Intuitions don't matter on my view. So intuitions are just a basis to come up with a hypothesis. What does this have to do with evidence of a God?
Well, I mean, again, it goes back to we're not talking about hypotheses here that we're testing out, right? Okay. We're basing them on truths that are apparent to us initially, right? That it seems to me that it's completely reasonable that whatever begins to exist has a cause, right?
Okay.
Or if you want to go,
so how is that,
whatever
how does that get
could fail to exist has an explanation for its existence, right?
Okay, I agree. I'm happy to grant that. How does that get to a God?
Okay, well, I mean, naturally, then we're going to go back to that. Okay, let's see which argument should I go with today. Okay, let's just go with this. Let's go with the cosmological argument. All right, it seems evident that whatever could fail to exist has an explanation for its existence.
Sure.
And now we naturally go back to the totality of things, of contingent things. So that itself needs an explanation for its existence.
Yeah. So there's a necessary thing. I can grant there's a necessary thing. There's no reason to think it has a mind. So I wouldn't call it a God.
Oh, I wouldn't say God is a mind either. So I mean, I'm perfectly fine with you there.
Okay. How did you define a God?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about his essence, what he is, I don't know. God is a proper name.
Let me give you. So I define a God as a non-physical consciousness of some kind. Now I would
reject that.
Okay, that's fine. So I would say that if it doesn't have a consciousness, I wouldn't call it a God. I just call it a natural force. So if you're saying that all there is there is some fundamental essence to nature, which is a natural force that isn't conscious, I'm happy to grant that. Like I'm fine with that. Like I think everyone in physics thinks that's the case. But we just wouldn't call it a God.
I'm neither arguing that it's physical either.
What?
I'm just saying that those aren't all our options.
Right. I mean, I agree. So I think that there could be a natural necessary force, like most people do. That's totally fine.
Well, but I mean, again, the issue is about ambiguity. What do you mean here by force?
A non-conscious force. So it's not conscious. It's just a force like gravity, a force like nature, an unguided natural force.
You just use the definition into the very thing you're trying to define.
What? You asked for a definition.
I asked you what is a force, and you said it's a non-conscious force.
Yeah, so
that doesn't define it.
So unguided. So it's pretty simple to understand. It's a thing that is guided by some non-conscious entity. So it's a force. It's a non-conscious thing. That's it. That's all I'm defining it as.
So a force is. I'm still having a hard time understanding because at one time you say it's it's just being a non-conscious entity, and the other time is saying that it's guided by something. That
Yeah, so this is really easy. Like,
can't
how do
be
you
both.
define gravity? Like, what kind of force is
Gravity
gravity?
I mean, if we're talking about like general relativity, it's the curvature of space-time.
Yeah, so no, how do you define the forces, the natural forces, the weak electromagnetic strong? How do you define forces in physics?
Well, I mean, generally for me, they're just quote unquote habits of nature. So I
Okay,
just
that's
hold
fine.
that,
You can
we
say there's
see
a natural
patterns, and
thing
then we
there.
just-
So there's a natural thing there, and it has some kind of nature to it. It's like there's nature, and it has a way it operates. So that's all that we mean by the fundamental force. There's
Okay,
nature,
if
it
that's
has
what you
an
mean,
operation.
as in like, so I take it that you mean here force is something that, given its conditions, will necessarily produce one option, right?
Well,
Like
no,
that it will
because
necessarily
it can be
create.
random too, so it doesn't need to be determined. There can be random forces. That's in physics. The consensus is there is actually true randomness. So my only contention is there is nature. It doesn't have a mind, but it does have a way it operates, and that's the force.
Well, okay, but then again, that goes back to the same problem.
What problem?
The principle of sufficient reason, right there, right?
Well,
You
no, the
can't just say
principle of
that-
sufficient reason is rejected by most philosophers. It's not actually correct. Secondly, it wouldn't matter even if that was the
Okay.
case because its nature is its own reason. So even if I were granted the principle of sufficient reason, the natural thing can be its own explanation.
Again, first of all, to say that, for example, most philosophers reject the principle of sufficient reason. I mean, even if I grant you that.
Oh, yeah, it's
okay,
actually stated
really-
like on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So it's not
Okay, but
well
that's,
accepted.
for example, in Western philosophy. But I mean, if you're going to talk about, I'm not from that tradition.
Okay.
So from going on, well, that's what Western philosophy includes. Okay, so what? It still seems to me, for example, a self-evident truth that any contingent thing, right? As I explained, because I think if you're talking about principle of sufficient reason, the way Leibniz defines it, that whatever explains why something is and why it is not, then I would agree to you. But I would argue that at least some form, like for example, some contingent thing or some concrete thing, if it exists, needs an explanation for its existence. And so, if we're talking about a weak principle of sufficient reason like that, then I think that
Well, I could just grant that every contingent thing has an explanation. I wouldn't say concrete. There could be a concrete necessary thing, no problem. But I could grant that every contingent thing needs an explanation. So I can grant you the PSR, and it still works perfectly fine under my explanation that there is a natural thing that is non-conscious, that is a necessary thing that grounds all of existence. That's perfectly fine. There's no contradiction with that in the PSR.
Well, actually, there is, because then we go back to this, right? By necessity means, that the thing itself, right, is uncaused.
Yes.
Right.
Which can be natural, so you don't need a cause for a natural thing. Where's the problem?
Well, I mean, again, let me finish here, right? So necessity, then, we have to deal with is what I would call the principal determination, that the things in this world could be one way or the other, and there needs to be an explanation for why reality went one way instead of the other way. And I would argue that implies a will, an attribute by virtue of which chooses one option over the other.
So yeah, that seems to not follow at all. Like you don't need a choice at all. You could just have a quantum feature, a quantum fluctuation that makes the choice essentially. Just it's determined by other physical forces. Like you don't need a choice there at all. Like choice doesn't even make sense.
But there you go.
Explain
You explained it right there, determined by other physical forces. But as we said,
like random.
Then it's caused. It's caused. Then.
Yes. If God created the universe is caused by God.
Agreed. So we agreed then, okay, that if the necessary being is uncaused, right?
Yeah.
Then that would mean that there can be no external influences onto it.
Right.
Okay.
So there's some force of nature which is uncaused, which then created the forces of nature, the other forces like gravity, weak electromagnetic. So those are caused, and they're caused by this fundamental force. So these other laws are contingent on this non-contingent.
It goes back to this, right? It goes back to this. Okay, so the necessary being exists by necessity, uncaused. All right.
Yep.
The world that it created is by its very nature contingent. It could be one way or it could be another way.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
Now, the difficulty that I'm having here is that you're saying that it's influenced by forces. Am I at least understanding this correctly, right?
The necessary thing isn't influenced by forces. The contingent things are influenced by the force of the necessary thing. The necessary thing is the force.
But again, hold on. Can you run back to me one more time?
Yeah. So there's the necessary thing, which is a force. The necessary thing is a force, and it causes the contingent universe to exist.
Let's not talk about force as well. Let's just focus more on the causal relationship between the necessary being and the contingent thing, because
what part do you want to explain there? So like, just like God created the universe, the natural force thing created our contingent universe. So there's a quantum fluctuation inside of the necessary force, and it produced our universe the way it is. It could have produced it in many different ways, just like in any quantum fluctuation, and it landed on our particular configuration by a quantum fluctuation, just like all quantum fluctuations work.
Well, I mean, if I'm remembering right, based on my studies on physics, quantum fluctuations, they are caused by things, though. They're not uncaused.
Well, no, that's the part that I mentioned earlier. So the consensus in physics is that quantum fluctuations are inherently random. There is an inherent randomness force in the universe. That's the consensus in physics right now. So they're not caused by anything.
Okay, but by random, they just mean that, but there would still, for example, be a disposition towards that thing to produce something or another, right? That's what at least the Heisenberg uncertainty principle leads us, that you would have a disposition towards one or the other.
I don't see how that has anything to do with the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Says we can't determine location and energy at the same time. It has nothing to do with the principle of quantum mechanics in this way at all. But it's that some quantum mechanical fluctuations do have proclivities, like, for example, the decay rate of uranium-238. Yes, that does have a rate, but it's not determined. It's completely random. Like, it could happen at any time. It just happens to happen in a very regular way.
I think I understand where our issue then lies. Right. My point is that for me, for example, the necessary being is uncaused and unchanged from before. If you even want to talk about, before, right, that before the thing existed, right, there was still no change in the necessary being whatsoever. It is still what it is.
So I'm saying the same thing. The natural force still is what it is. It has no changes. It made changes to other things. The contingent universe had changes. The necessary thing had no changes. So where's the problem there?
Well, the issue is, for example, the issue is here is this. The thing caused, right? Its relationship to the contingent thing is 50-50.
What?
Right? It could not have created. As far as I remember of virtual particles, is that they don't operate under this 50-50 basis.
Right. It's not 50-50. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of virtual
Exactly.
particles.
So that's why I'm saying it can't be the same then.
Well, no, that's incorrect. So like you could say that every virtual particle has a 50-50 of collapsing or not collapsing. I mean, that's technically true because it's just saying either it does or does not collapse. But the rate it collapses is different for each and every one of them. Like uranium-238 has a different one than uranium-237. But they all have a 50-50 of either collapse or not collapse. So what you're saying makes no sense.
Right, but a totality of the things, right? It's 50-50. It's not 50-50, right?
What are you talking about? 50-50 is just saying
as in all congregates, right?
I have no idea what you're saying. So when you say the universe either could have been created or could have not been created, that's like saying either the uranium-238 could collapse or it could not collapse. Like it's just a dichotomy between the two states. It doesn't tell you what the probability of the states are. There's no relevance there to anything being said related to the natural force. So it has no relevance to the necessary thing whatsoever. The probability of the creating versus not creating. It's totally irrelevant.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to get, because the term force is pretty vague here. And that's what's really what I'm really struggling with what you're trying to define here.
A non-conscious thing. So it's just a non-conscious regularity of nature. That's it.
Okay, non-conscious. Because then, of course, then the thing is that that still doesn't define us by virtue of what property, right?
What?
Like, we're talking about the property. Yes, that it created the thing. So on virtue of what did it create the world or not, right? It cannot be the fact that it's an unnecessary force.
Okay,
right?
how would
That
you
does
answer
not
that? How would
entail
you answer that for God? What is by virtue of what did God create the
his
universe?
will.
Okay, I'd say by quantum fluctuations. By quantum fluctuations is how it did.
But quantum fluctuations, by their nature, for example, as far as I remember, right? I'm gonna have to. Can I just double check one thing? 'Cause I'm pretty sure quantum fluctuations aren't pure 50-50.
They don't need to be 50-50. So God's will isn't
But
50-50.
it does, in my view. It is 50-50.
So God's choice is 50-50?
In the sense that any world that he chooses could have been a reality. Yeah.
So then I can generate a specific kind of a quantum particle that does have exactly 50-50. There's no problem with that at all. Like, there are definitely quantum particles that have 50-50. So if I could just pick one of those if you want. It doesn't make a difference. Like, no one in physics cares if it's 50-50. I don't know why you do, but if you do, like, all right, I can pick a quantum particle that has a 50-50 chance. Okay, now they're the same. So I don't see how this is a problem, but all right, fine, it's 50-50.
All right. Well, I mean, then naturally, I mean, for me, that would only go on to further prove occasionalism. But
yeah, that's why, like, no one in physics cares about this 50-50 thing you're saying, but I'll grant it if you want.
I do because we're trying to go back to what the sufficient reason is going to be, right? Why is it that it went that way or the other?
Sure,
and
but
I would
again,
just
that
argue
has
that,
nothing to do
from
with.
my view, just go back to the will of God.
Yeah, again, but that has nothing
and
to do with 50-50. So none of that's relevant to it having a 50-50 chance. I don't know why you keep bringing up 50-50. It's completely
Well, because
irrelevant.
a contingent thing in relation to the necessary being, right, has to be 50-50.
No.
If you are, well, because if you're going to say, for example, it has a disposition, right? Because if we're talking about laws of nature, right?
So
they're
like
either going to be
the necessary thing could have an 80-20, could have an 80% chance of creating the thing and not a 20% chance of creating it, and that's perfectly fine.
no, not at all, actually.
How so?
Because the thing is then by virtue of what is it that has an 80% chance?
It's nature,
right?
its own nature. So like one of the Christian arguments is that God has a nature to want to create conscious beings. Therefore, God is more likely to choose conscious beings than not.
I don't accept that concept of God, though. I don't think God has.
You don't need to. So it's just a hypothetical.
To creating a world.
So does God have a nature? Does God have a nature?
Like, if you mean nature as in like a disposition to act a certain way, then I would say no. God has no nature in that sense. We don't accept nature in that sense. But if we're talking about nature as in what it is, right?
Yeah.
Its definitional content, then I would say I don't know.
What you don't know. God has a way that he is, like a particular substance.
I don't accept that. I mean, if you mean, for example, he has certain essential attributes like knowledge, living, speech, power, will, all of that, I'll grant you that. But that doesn't tell me what God is.
Yeah, so I'm just talking about the essential attributes. So God has essential attributes, right? So, and one of those essential attributes could be like he's loving or whatever. So if God has this loving attribute, this is hypothetical. I'm not saying
there is like
this is just hypothetical. It's hypothetical here. So I'm not saying that you would agree with this. It's possible that there is
maybe 1 second. I'm gonna go grab some water.
All right, sure.
I'll be right back.
So it's possible that there is an essential attribute that is like God is all loving. And if there is that essential attribute, then God is more likely to create a universe with a particular kind of being in it. Or if God is made of spaghetti, and that's one of his essential attributes, it's more likely that God's going to create a universe with spaghetti in it. So his essential attributes can make certain universes more or less likely. I'll wait for him to return to say that again.
Until he comes back. I think it was maybe the definition, because he's using intuition, I guess, in a different way. Because you don't call, for example, you accepted the first premise, but you don't you wouldn't say it's justified by intuition, right?
Yeah, that's what I said to him earlier. Like, you can define intuition whatever way you want, and that's why I tried to lead into what does this have to do with any argument? Show the relevance to an argument, and that's where we got into the contingency argument.
Okay, because from most skeptics I spoke to, they would definitely doubt the first premise. They would say, like, "Oh, are you justifying it with intuition or whatever your word you want to use for that?"
Yeah, I
and
just
they would
granted.
just reject it.
I'm happy to grant the first premise. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Like, okay, for sure.
Okay, because majority of them wouldn't do that. They would be like, "No, there's no evidence for that."
Yeah, I've definitely heard that from some of the YouTube atheists. I wouldn't agree with it. I'm happy to grant it. I don't see a problem with that.
Does Malpass accept the first premise, or does he deny it?
He presents arguments for both. So it doesn't make a difference. Like in his view,
Okay.
like in the quantum mechanical view of physics, there are things that are created that don't have a cause. That's what the randomness property of quantum mechanics is. They just reject the first premise. But I tend to grant it. I don't care. I don't mind.
Okay.
All right, so I'm back now. Yeah, so
All right, so yeah, let me. So it is possible that God has particular attributes that cause him to be more likely to do one thing than another thing. Like it's possible that those attributes, like for example, if he's intelligent, it's more likely he's going to do a smart thing than a stupid thing, right?
I mean, no, I would reject that because I don't hold that conception of God that you say that
he's intelligent.
Well, God is. Well, if you mean, I think what you're talking about here is wisdom. If God is wise,
yeah, let's go with wisdom.
To our benefit. Okay.
So if God is wise, then it's more likely he's going to do a wise thing than an unwise thing, right?
No, not in the way that you're defining it.
I'm defining it however you're defining it. So whatever way you define wisdom.
My definition for wisdom for me is knowledge of a thing's proper place, which is decreed by God.
Okay, so God is more likely to create things in their proper place than it's very unlikely he's going to create things in not their proper place, correct?
Well, I mean, for me, wisdom is just whatever God does, right?
That's fine. That's fine. So it's more likely he's going to do a wise thing than an unwise thing, correct?
You're not understanding what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying, and it's exactly
you're not
my
actually,
point.
because if you understand what I'm saying, it wouldn't. For example, I'll give you an example. All right, would it be wise, for example, for God to just send all of us to hell, right? If He so willed it.
By your definition, yes.
I would say yes.
Yes. That's fine.
Yeah. So anything God does is going to be wise.
So it's more probable that he's going to do a wise thing than an unwise thing, right? It's like 100%. There's 100% chance he's going to do a wise thing and a 0% chance he's going to do an unwise thing, right?
Right, because wisdom, as we define, is just whatever he does.
So attributes, a thing can have attributes that makes it more likely to do one thing than another thing.
Hold on, because I think here you're conflating the names of God with the attributes here. His wisdom describes his knowledge, right?
Okay.
For us, for example, right, if you're referring to divine wisdom, right, ultimately it relates to God knowing himself in the most perfect way possible.
Yeah,
right.
I'm fine with that.
If you're referring to actions, it's just whatever he does.
That's fine too. So the only point I'm making here is that the necessary thing can have attributes, and those attributes can make some of its actions more likely than others.
No, by his definition, all his actions are like there's no chance there because everything he does is
exactly
wise.
By definition.
Right. So
there's no separation.
So see, what are the other? This applies to any attribute. So what other attributes does God have?
Well, if you want to talk about, for example, his seeing, hearing, speech, will, power.
Will. Let's go with the will one. What is God has a will, right?
Yeah.
And so this God.
That's a conflation between, the essence and the attributes.
Right. I haven't made an argument here, so it can't be a conflation yet. I'm just asking questions. So if God has a will, does God have a will to do some things and not other things? Like what is his will?
Will, I mean an attribute by virtue which chooses one possibility over another.
Okay. So he's more likely to choose one than to not choose, right?
No, he necessarily has to choose. I mean, like, for example, but what he chooses is, indeterministic. Whatever he chooses is going to be whatever.
But he's going to choose, so he has to choose. If you're going to make a bet, he's going to make a choice.
I mean, he has to make, for example.
Yes, he has to make a choice. So that proves my point. So all my point here is that he has attributes which are going to make some things more likely than other things. That's all you need. No. This is super, super simple. Like if he has a will to make choices, he's going to make choices. Like that, it's that simple.
But there's no choices. He is doing it like necessarily. Like he's not choosing.
That's fine. That's exactly what I'm saying. He has attributes that makes things more likely. That's all it means. Attributes literally mean that. That's what an attribute is. Attribute by definition is a property that makes one thing more likely than another. That's what a property is.
Not in our view.
But it is in your view too, because that's what attribute means. An attribute means this thing and not that thing.
No, an attribute means something that subsists in an essence, but
No, that's actually not what it means. That's the Thomistic definition, which is wrong. But even if we grant that definition, it's still the same
not a
thing.
Thomist.
It's
Well,
still
I
the same
hold
thing.
matter
So
and form.
even if you define it that way, that means there is a kind of thing that is not a different kind of thing. That's one thing which is more likely than another thing.
No, because again, can you let me speak here? Like for example, God could choose to not create anything at all if he so willed.
That's a choice, isn't
Right?
it?
That is a choice.
So he
and
has
if
to make a
chooses
choice. He
create
has to
something
make a
else,
choice, doesn't he?
Yes, he necessarily
Because-
has to will.
Because of one of his attributes, he has to make a choice, correct?
Not because of that attribute is by virtue of definition. I mean, that's a very arbitrary definition. It's like saying, well, God has to be knowing if he's knowing. I mean,
Yes.
sure. I'll
Yes.
grant you that.
Yes, so he
But
has
that
attributes, which means one thing has to be more likely than another. One thing has to be 100%, one thing has to be 0% because he has an attribute. Not 50-50. His knowledge isn't 50-50. He doesn't 50-50 have knowledge. He has 100% knowledge, right?
I mean, he necessarily has knowledge.
Right.
What you're trying to say is that he has a disposition towards creating something versus another. And that's a different thing.
I didn't say that at all. So all attributes are is that there's one thing that's more likely and one thing that's less likely. That's all that matters. So if just like your God can have infinite knowledge or whatever, my natural thing can have infinite of whatever I want to make it do something. It's the same thing. So if you have a property that makes one thing more likely and one thing less likely, so can mine. It doesn't need to be 50-50. It makes absolutely zero sense to say that.
Okay, well, I mean, see, the issue here is this, and I'm surprised that you still haven't realized it yet, that the issue that you're saying that, for example, I don't hold to the view that attribute properties or attributes that you're defining are just things that make it more likely or less likely or not, given God's necessary being, right? His essence and his attributes are all essential. There is no 50-50 or 70% or 90% that he has to be this way or he has to be that way.
What is the percent chance God has all knowledge?
I mean, there would be no chance involved at all.
Does God have all knowledge or can God have half knowledge?
He has all knowledge.
So there's a 100% chance he has all knowledge. It's a 0% chance he does not have all knowledge. He is limited by this. He can't not have all knowledge. He must necessarily have all knowledge, correct?
But that's a very, I don't see how this is, he must or he cannot, because the thing is that if we argue in the way that you're trying to say it here, right, it implies, for example, God is conditioned to be that way, but he's not.
Could he have been differently?
For example, no.
So he is conditioned to be that way?
No, he isn't.
Could he have been differently?
No, he couldn't.
So what does that mean?
It means for example, God by necessity. It means, for example, since God, for example, is
by virtue of what is he necessary?
By him being uncaused.
So he's conditioned by the fact he's uncaused to be this way, and he couldn't have been otherwise. He's determined to be this way.
No.
Determined means 100% chance, like it couldn't have been otherwise, right?
No, determined means, for example, that this will necessarily occur.
So his necessary being is a necessary thing that couldn't have been otherwise. Because of his necessary nature, which couldn't have been otherwise, which means it's 100%, not 0%. And so it's not 50-50, right? Did I get any of that wrong?
So could you say that one more time?
Yeah, so God has a necessary nature of being all-knowing, and he's all-knowing because of his necessary nature, which couldn't have been otherwise, and he can't choose it. And there's no possible way he could have had 50-50 knowledge. It's always 0-100. It has to be 100%. And there's no way he could change that. It's a part of his nature.
Oh, okay. So now I get what you're saying here. It's basically saying God has a nature, right? And that nature is that he is all-knowing. Right?
Yes.
Again, that wouldn't necessarily be how we would conceive nature.
What? That doesn't make any sense. So what you're saying is incoherent.
Not really. We're not really saying anything coherent here. I mean, by nature. I mean, if you mean by nature, it's definitional content of God, no problem. But what you're trying to say is nature, as in
That's all I'm saying is definitional content. So your God has a definitional content that has these attributes, these essential attributes. My quantum particle can also have essential attributes. Like, it's that simple. And one of those can make it, it's why it's 50-50, just like God is. There's no problem. This should be really simple to understand.
Well, the issue goes back to this. The reason why it's so difficult to understand is that there's just a lot of vague misunderstanding that's going on here.
I haven't misunderstood anything you've said so far. I just think you don't understand the problem with your argument.
That's what I'm saying here, is that you literally have.
So this is pretty easy to prove. Any assertion you make about God can be made about a non-conscious entity that is just a force, nothing else. Anything that God can do, anything the supernatural can do, the unknown natural can do necessarily. So anything a God can explain, a non-God could explain equally or better, always, necessarily, no matter what.
But then, I mean, if you're going to say that they do the same thing, then it's distinction without difference. So then,
yeah, that's the point, is that whatever created the universe, you don't need a God for that. And so there's no reason to assume a God did it.
Okay, but again, like, for example, let's say, for example, like, the necessary being, right, creates the world. Okay.
Sure.
You claim that it's a virtue of a quantum fluctuation. So is that quantum fluctuation something in God, or this force?
It's one of its essential properties.
A quantum fluctuation is one of its essential properties?
Yep.
But as far as I remember, a quantum fluctuation is an action. It's something that happens.
Nope.
It's a verb.
Nope.
It's not?
Nope.
So fluctuations aren't things that happen?
No, it's an essential quality. It's an essential attribute to the nature of reality. It's not a thing. It's an essence, not an action.
What?
Like, go look up what quantum fluctuations, how they work. They're not just like a thing that occurs at point X. It's not how it works. They're eternal and unending and always are there. There's no way to get rid of them. It's a part of the fundamental nature of quantum mechanics. They're not actions. It's an essence, like a force, like gravity. It's just our word for it.
Yeah, they are quite uncertain. There's a whole temporal random change in the amount of energy.
But I don't see how this explains the principle of sufficient reason.
I didn't say anything about the principle of sufficient reason. So just like your God can will things into existence, quantum fluctuations can create things just fine without a will.
Because it still hasn't explained the sufficient reason for why X happened to Y, though. Like, why is it that Y happened?
So saying choice is equally as much an answer as saying quantum fluctuation. They work equally as well. There's no quantum fluctuation is actually better because it has some deterministic values to it, but it doesn't answer it better to say choice there. Choice does nothing to answer the question.
Because for example, it eternally will X, right? Then what I'm trying to say is that then why will, if, for example, if God eternally willed Y, then Y will necessarily occur, right?
Right. Like I said earlier, he has a will which causes him to do certain things.
Why
Yes.
did that happen?
Like I said earlier, God has a will which is going to cause certain things to happen more likely than others because he eternally wills it. Then yeah, that's one thing which is not 50-50, and we can have the exact same thing in quantum mechanics. There's no difference there. Like, this is why no one takes this seriously in physics. Like, any of this made up nonsense can just be attributed to any quantum particle with no effort.
Hold on, I'm going to check because I'm pretty sure you're using quantum particles here the wrong way. Let's see.
You mean fluctuations? Quantum fluctuations?
Yes. Because I'm pretty sure they're not 50-50.
I never said they were 50-50. I specifically said they're not.
Okay, then there you go.
No. I specifically said we can pick some that are 50-50, and then we can make those fit into your very silly requirement that has absolutely nothing to do with reality. No one cares about this 50-50 thing. This is just something you've made up, like saying it's made of spaghetti. The natural thing must be made of spaghetti. Like, it's meaningless.
The very fact that contingent things are by their very nature are indifferent to their existence or non-existence.
Wrong. So again, that's irrelevant. Like, that has nothing to do with the necessary thing having a 50-50 chance.
Quite relevant.
No, it's not. Nothing you said would mean that the necessary thing would have a 50-50 chance of creating or not creating. Nothing you said. That's literally means nothing. There's no relevance to that whatsoever. Like based on your silly theory, like if God had a more likely chance to create a universe, well, then he wouldn't be God because it's not 50-50. That's such a silly argument.
Right, I would agree with that. I mean,
that's such a silly argument. Like no one in physics takes that seriously. That's not a real thing. That's a conspiracy theory ridiculousness.
That's not. But I mean, we're talking about here. We're not talking about physics here. So I don't understand.
Yes, we are. The Big Bang is physics. Like physicists are the ones who have the authority on this. Everything that the theistic arguments are all just gibberish nonsense that have nothing to do with reality. But if you think they work, we can just mirror them and copy them and get a better answer on physics every single time. So none of that's evidence. None of that's
ignoring the whole premises of my argument. Then.
Yeah. You claim that there needs to be 50-50 is nothing.
The whole reality, right? As it is, that necessary being. He could have created or could not have created. And I'm not talking about here like 80% chance or 20% chance or 90%, because obviously, prior to the thing's existence, right, if the thing truly is contingent, right, then it needs to have, for example, it has to be indifferent to its existence or non-existence. If there is a disposition there, then you're pretty much saying that the thing exists prior to its existence that makes it inclined to existence or non-existence.
So everything, you're just confused. It's a composition division fallacy. You're just doing a basic fallacy of reasoning here. Like if I said everything is either brick or not a brick, like does that mean that every object has a 50-50 chance of being a brick? Well, no.
Oh no, I'm not doing.
That's exactly what you're doing. That's exactly what you're
doing. I'm not saying that because every contingent thing has a 50-50 chance. I'm saying that because the world is composed of contingent things, therefore the whole world is contingent.
No, that's not what I'm saying. So listen carefully. If I say
hold on. Can you please let me speak?
Well, you've interrupted me like in the middle of my point, which is why you missed it. So here's the point. If you say that either everything has a 50-50 chance of either being a brick or not a brick, and you just pick, because there's only two there, it's a true dichotomy, either brick or not brick. Obviously that's wrong. Like, no, there's not a 50-50 chance of any object being a brick. There's lots of objects that are not bricks. Most objects are not bricks. So the probability of any object being a brick is not 50-50, even though it's a true dichotomy that things are either a brick or are either not a brick. There's a difference there between a true dichotomy, either God created or did not create, and the probability of him creating a particular kind of thing. Those are two separate things. So your argument is as silly as saying, well, everything is either a brick or not a brick, therefore it's a 50-50 chance that this is a brick or this is not a brick. Completely silly.
Yeah. Prosecutor's fallacy, I believe.
Thank you.
But I mean, the issue, like I said, it just isn't being dealt with here. I'm not saying here, right, that there's a brick or not a brick, and there's 50% chance that any random object that I pick in the world is going to be a brick or not, right?
So your argument is that God either created or didn't create. Therefore, there is a 50% chance that God created.
No, I'm saying that contingent things, right, by their very nature, right, have a 50-50 chance towards existence or non-existence. All right?
Right.
And so there needs to be sufficient reason outside of them, right? And that necessary being has to choose between one possible reality versus the other, right?
Yes.
Of all the possible worlds to create, God chose one of the world, and that became the actual world.
Yeah. And that's exactly like my example with the bricks. So everything has a 50-50 chance. Either it's a brick or it's not a brick. Well, no, there's lots of things that are not bricks. Most things are not bricks. So everything has a 50-50 chance of existing as it is or not existing as it is. But there's actually lots of ways that could have existed and not exactly as they are. So the fact that they could exist as they are or not as they are isn't 50-50 at all, even though it's a true dichotomy. It's the exact same example I used with the bricks.
But I mean, you're not paying attention to the important distinction between contingent things and their relation to existence.
I granted that. That's the exact same in both analogies. There is a necessary
thing.
So
then
there's a necessary thing in both our models. Both of our things have a necessary thing in it. Yours has a God, mine has a quantum particle. They both have the chance to create contingent things in one way or another way, and they both deliberately create them in one way and not the other way. Like those are the same.
Right, but again, you're not listening to what I'm saying here, because a brick has, by its very innate definition, right, could or could not exist. I'll grant you that. But it's not by virtue of being a brick that it could or could not. There's a 50-50 chance that it could or could not exist, but it's a virtue of being a contingent thing.
Okay, and that's, again, you haven't pointed out a difference between the models. You have to point out what the difference is. So we both have necessary things. They both have the contingent thing doesn't matter. We're not talking about the contingent things. We're talking about the necessary things. I have a necessary thing. You have a necessary thing. They both explain the universe. Show a difference.
Like I said,
You didn't say anything. What's the difference?
We're trying to explain how the totality of contingent things, and that I would argue requires what I would say the principle of determination. Yeah, that when you have that an agent has the ability to do P or not P, and therefore the fact that the world could be otherwise, right, implies that the necessary being must have knowledge of all possible reality.
Nope, not at all. So quantum particle can do P or not P. It does P. Problem solved. So I just did the exact same thing. Didn't invoke knowledge at all.
But okay, but then again, you're still not going back to the sufficient reason. What is the sufficient reason? What
the
is it that
necessary thing is the
makes
reason
it?
of itself. The necessary thing is the reason. That's all you need. There's a necessary thing it creates, and so there's a created world. Problem solved.
But that implies, for example, that it is identical to the very thing that.
Nowhere did I say there's an identical. The necessary thing and the contingent things are identical. Nowhere did I say that.
You didn't let me finish.
Okay.
That's why. He said that the thing that by virtue which it creates the quantum world, whatever you want to say it, right? It would be identical to that property.
That doesn't make any sense. Like what are you even saying?
So I'm basically saying like
God's
it
will.
has a property.
God's will is Himself. Like, right? Those are identical. God and God's will.
No,
God is a part. God's will is a part of God.
No, neither of that either.
What?
I hope.
We don't hold to divine simplicity, if that's what you're thinking.
Well, no, I don't like. What is God's will? It's a part of God, right? There's something in God that is God's will. It is a part of Him.
We don't believe that God, for example, has parts, but neither do we hold that God's attributes are identical to His essence.
That doesn't make a difference. So I don't care how you define parts here. It's in God somewhere. God's will is it's inside of Him.
It's not a part of Him.
I didn't say part. It doesn't matter what parts you use. Either if God's will isn't a part of Him, it's not God's will. It can't be God's will and be not a part of Him.
No, because
I can't be separate from my will. Like, my will can't be someone else's will and still be mine at the same time. It has to be in Him. What you're saying makes literally no sense.
Well, no, because, like I said, God's properties are not like human properties.
For God's properties, they have to be a part of God. That's what property means.
I'm talking about necessary being, right?
If a necessary being has properties, the properties have to be a part of the necessary being. That's literally what it means.
No, it wouldn't.
Okay, how can a being have properties which are not a part of the being?
Well, I mean, like I said, where is the contradiction in that? I mean, we're talking about a
being has properties which are not a part of the being. That's literally a contradiction. That's A and not A at the same time.
Mm-hmm. What we say is that they are not external to God, right? They're not other than God. They're not other than the essence.
So they're in God. They're a part of God.
So they're not.
So they're in God. So if they're not a part of God, then they are a part of God. So if they're not separate from God, they're in God. If they're not different
God
things, they are the same thing. Like this. Okay, I'm bored with this. This is so dumb. Like, anybody else got any questions?
Yeah, I mean, if I may, JJ Trump.
Yeah.
What's your qualification first? What are your qualifications, if I may ask?
Which what?
What's your qualification?
I audited all the classes for philosophy, so I didn't get the degree because it cost an extra $50,000, but I took all the classes.
I thought you were a physicist.
No, philosopher.
Okay, that's why I was confused. Yeah, what your reference is about the Casimir
effect?
Casimir effect, yeah. It's totally untrue. You need to put energy to the system to gain the particle. Otherwise, it's a virtual particle.
What?
You cannot break.
The
Yes.
Casimir effect is when you take two pieces of metal, put them very close together, and they get collapsed by virtual particles. You don't put any energy in. Like, what are you talking about?
Not the way you're thinking of.
What?
You need to move the plates to gain the momentum. You need to
They
move
don't move
something.
anything.
Or-
So the plates
or
are
create
moved by the virtual particles. We don't touch anything.
Bro, here's the thing. Like, you have no understanding of the conservation of momentum and conservation of mass.
No, I
And you're
understand both of
conflating
those. Like,
things.
none of
You
those
also
have anything to do.
conflated the virtual particles with matter and antimatter. When the universe came to existence, the question was, did it come from existence from virtual particles?
No, irrelevant. So all of that gibberish you're saying is completely irrelevant to what I said. So the Casimir effect
What
is when
gibberish? Like, you don't
I'm
understand
literally
physics, bro.
explaining it to you right now. So the
Right.
Casimir effect is
No,
when
you're-
virtual particles can come into reality and
Yeah.
cause the plates to collapse.
Yeah.
Which is exactly
Yeah,
what
you
the
need
same
to
thing in
move
the Big Bang is. And I use particles and antiparticles as an example to explain that to you.
Actually, no. You're mistaken. How do you say it? Antimatter and matter to suggest they're virtual particles.
No, I did not say that. I used
You
those as an
said some
example.
of them. No, you said the Big Bang has no need for a
Yes, the
anti-Big
Big Bang,
because of
the
virtual
Big
particles.
Bang created,
Yeah,
the Big Bang was like, no,
yeah.
stop. Well, let me explain this to you again. The Big Bang is like a virtual particle. It was caused in the same way a virtual particle was.
Yeah,
And
okay.
then the
You
virtual
need to
particle
fight for that.
has an effect, which then leads to particles and antiparticles, just like the Hawking radiation can lead to virtual particles splitting and becoming particles and antiparticles.
Do you
It's
know?
literally
Do you
the
know
same
that
thing.
you need to lose the black hole to gain the particles? When I'm talking
No,
about Hawking.
the black hole is
Yes,
just
you
a
are.
thing that separates
Yes,
the
you are.
particles. That's
Yes,
it.
you are,
just
bro.
need stop.
Yes.
You need a thing to separate the virtual particles to cause them to come into existence. A black hole is one thing that can cause a separation. Another thing is a big explosion.
Yeah, by losing part of the mass. Otherwise, you break equivalency square. You cannot
Irrelevant.
break
I've already addressed your nonsense. That's irrelevant. Hawking radiation is one
you
way
were speaking
to
nonsense.
separate.
I actually researched it. I actually researched it.
No, you didn't. You clearly didn't. You clearly don't know anything you're talking about.
I did.
Could you mute this kid? Can we get this guy out of here? Oh my god! Like,
I'm not a mod, so who's a mod in here? I think.
Well, I
Yeah,
am.
but
Yeah.
cool it down and,
Okay,
and
you guys
and
need to,
have
like,
an
stop
exchange if you like
fighting.
Yeah, I just checked. Quantum particles are not truly random in the sense that he's talking about.
He's talking about fluctuation. I
quantum
think.
fluctuations, and
Quantum fluctuations are not truly random. Yeah, I just checked.
I literally said they weren't like 4 times. I said I can make up one that's 50-50 to meet your stupid standard, but they are not like that, and they don't need to be because no one says that.
But they don't work that way. That's not how.
I agreed with you. I said they don't work that way, and they don't need to. Your standard is silly. No one in physics cares about your silly standard because it has nothing to do with reality.
But we're not talking about physics.
Yes, we are. That's the problem. Like, if you think there is a thing that requires 50-50 to create the universe, I can pick a quantum particle that's 50-50. They work in lots of different ways. They don't need to be 50-50.
That doesn't work. Because
Yes, it
then
does.
again, the question is that how do you know it? You know it by its observation in nature. So I mean,
That's irrelevant. How you know it doesn't matter to its ontology. Epistemology and ontology are separate things.
No. Well, I mean, the issue isn't this. The issue is about. Well, first of all,
I've already addressed your
ontology
gibberish.
should move
You
that
don't
far.
need 50-50 at all. If you want 50-50, I can give you a quantum particle that's 50-50. There's lots of different ones. They all work in different ways.
But that wouldn't be how laws of nature work. Then it's not explained by natural law.
That
or
would
anything.
literally
In fact, there would be no.
No. What you're saying again makes no sense. I don't want to go back into your gibberish. I've already addressed it. Quantum mechanics can explain the beginning of the universe better than any will can, which is why no one in physics takes the will argument seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not a physicist. How are you speaking on their behalf?
Because there's literally polls showing this. Where John Carroll literally said this in his debate with Liam Lane Craig. I can just quote the actual physicists who have all said this.
I've seen it. It's stupid.
You can have that opinion if you want, but the actual physicists say you're wrong. So if you want to know what the actual physicists say, there's one.
Can you look up?
Can you look
up black hole evaporations? Because Hawking radiation, that's the principle of Hawking radiation. You lose the mass to gain the particle.
Again, I've already addressed your nonsense. That's irrelevant to my point. So saying that I never disagreed with that, I agree with that, which is completely irrelevant to what I said. So I've already addressed that too. Anybody else have any questions? I think they kicked me out of the server. Hilarious.